across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good evening. The Prime Minister says there is no place for anti-Semitism in the UK, but it is alive and well and in Golders Green because 4 ambulances were an arson attack, destroyed them. Absolutely horrendous attack on the Jewish community, on an amazing public service put together by Jewish charities. There is just so much that we need to discuss this evening on this absolutely horrendous arson. We also need to discuss Iran's lies around its ballistic missiles and, of course, what's happening with that conflict more generally and what the Prime Minister has said about all of this. There's so much to discuss between now and 10 o'clock. I want to make sure I get as many calls on the air, whatever is on the tip of your tongue. I want to give you the space and the time to say it. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a WhatsApp text message. You can send me a WhatsApp voice message, less than a minute please, or give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. Let's just go through the day because it was very, very early in the morning, the middle of the night really, when this attack took place. And we're going to talk now to Caroline Levy, who was an eyewitness of the Golders Green attack. We'll also speak to Will Geddes in a second. But just before we do, let's see what Keir Starmer's reaction to it was. He says he was disgusted at the ambulance attack.
Can I start by expressing my disgust at this horrific anti-Semitic attack in Golders Green in the early hours of this morning. The idea that ambulances could be considered a target is simply horrendous, and I know the impact that that will have had on so many individuals, not just those in the area, and I've been with Sarah Sackman this morning, the constituency MP, but also the neighbouring MPs, but also, frankly, the whole Jewish community across the country, not least because this is not an isolated incident, and the rise of anti-Semitic hatred is there for all to see. This is not just an attack on the Jewish community, but it's an attack on all of us, on everyone who holds the fundamental British values of tolerance and respect.
Well, our reporter Samara Gill has been there from the early hours of the morning. This is just a flavour of the kind of things that people were saying to her.
Off camera, you told me that you moved to Israel. Do you feel safer in Israel than on the streets of Golders Green?
Absolutely, absolutely. I don't see much being done, if anything being done, for the Jewish community here. They talk a lot and don't see any action. This is why things like this has happened today.
So Samara Gill there speaking to a young man. We have so many different reports of what actually happened, the many, many dozens of phone calls that went to the emergency services, the health secretary saying that those 4 ambulances will be replaced. But the question I have in my mind is who did this and why? We know, of course, there's so much anti-Semitism in our society. We know that there are so many people who hate Jews, but there could be the emergence of a new Iranian-backed terror group that has been certainly mooted and has claimed responsibility for this. Will Geddes is a security expert and joins us now. Will, tell us about this.
Well, this is a particular group, Peter. Thanks for inviting me on the show, by the way.
Great to have you on.
Thanks, buddy. Ashab al-Yamin. Now, this is a group that's less than about a month old. Now, they've claimed responsibility for this. They are an Islamic extremist group that are directly tied to the IRGC in Iran. They've also claimed responsibility for 4 other attacks in Europe during this month. 1 in Belgium, 1 in Rotterdam, 1 in Amsterdam, and 1 in Greece. All of these were Jewish-related community assets like synagogues and centres. So this group made this claim on Telegram. Whether they are legit, it's always difficult to say at this stage, but they are the only group, as far as I know, Peter, that have actually broken cover and said, we are the same group that's responsible also for this.
It's fascinating, Will, because IRGC, of course, is directly linked to the Iranian regime. So could there, in theory, have been an order or an understanding, at least, from Tehran coming all the way through to this attack today? Was this something you think that was a warning? What was the message behind this, do you think, apart from the obvious anti-Semitism?
Well, I think, Peter, we would be naive to not expect any one of the various different terrorist cells that have been financed by the Iranian regime, by the IRGC, have been responsible for various different actions. I mean, in the last 2 years, Peter, there have been 20 plots foiled by the security services and anti-terrorism police that were Iranian-backed. And these included assassinations, kidnappings, and various other undermining operations that they were seeking to undertake. So in terms of this group being potentially aligned to this attack last night in North London, and bearing in mind what it actually was in terms of targeting, I think there's every good likelihood this was Iranian-backed.
We've heard that Saeed Ali Mousavi, the Iran's ambassador to the UK, has been summoned to the Foreign Office over his country's reckless and destabilising actions in Britain over the allegations, various allegations about 2 Iranian immigrants charged last week with spying on Jews in London and Tehran. We know this happened in the early hours of this morning. The video that we talked about, Ashab al-Yamin, on Telegram, showed footage of the arson along with a statement in English, Hebrew and Arabic. It's hard, of course, as you say, to actually find the truth in all of this. But do you think that the simplest explanation may well just be the right one?
Yeah, I think it is, Peter. I mean, I think if it wags its tail and it barks, it's a dog. And I think in this instance, this has got all the hallmarks. Whenever we look at something from a terrorism perspective or a counter-terrorism perspective, it's about what is the target, what is the aim, what is the location. And we know that every terrorist group wants publicity to promote their cause, their agenda, and to put themselves on the map. Now, this particular group, as you say, Peter, they're very young, they're very new. They are a group that has been born out of a previous group where the leader had been killed. And this could be seen as a retaliatory attack, even for that leader being disposed of. But when we look at what's happening with Iran right now, we've had terrorist attacks in the United States, albeit low level. We've seen other instances across the world, and particularly across Europe. We look at, obviously, Hezbollah, who launched that attack. That's the Lebanese Hezbollah, not the Iranian Hezbollah, who launched that attack on the RAF base in Cyprus. So, you know, I think it's one of the things that we've anticipated, Peter, is that all these various groups that have been financed and supported by Iran have been given very much the order to say, right, do what you need to do. And this most recent statement, Peter, which I'm sure you've probably just caught, about Iran saying, we're not interested in a ceasefire, and a big surprise is going to happen tonight, that is this night. Again, it's a watching brief.
Yeah, I mean, and that is something very much to worry about. And Iran has been tub-thumping and being very, very bullish about this. But of course, President Trump has too. It will be very interesting to see what happens there and what people have been talking about in regard to that. Certainly with the 4 vehicles, this was in the one thing that a lot of the media don't seem to have been reporting, is that it was actually in the grounds of a synagogue, and that is something that we'll talk to Caroline Levy about just now. For the meantime, Will, thank you. That is, will get us there. The security expert Caroline Levy is an eyewitness to the Golders Green attack and joins me now. Caroline, I know it's been an incredibly long day for you, so I really appreciate you joining us this evening. Can you just talk me through what you saw and just talk me through your day, really?
So I've been out and I went to bed early for my time at about 11, and then at 1:45 I heard a boom. But we get a lot of car crashes on here. It's a main road and there's no speed bumps, so people go fast. And I heard a bang, and then I heard car alarms going off. I kind of was like halfway back to sleep when 10 minutes later, another boom went off and more alarms. And I was thinking, something's not right here. And I went out, and so if you look at that screen, I'm right at the top of that road.
Okay, so you're literally a couple of 100 yards away, if that.
I'm literally a couple of 100 yards. So I went out, and then someone said to me, it's a Solar ambulance. And I'm like, okay. So I thought maybe one of the some electronic failure at an ambulance, and it had caused a blast and then another blast. And then quite a few people were gathering, and one of them works with Hatzalah, and he said, absolutely, this is anti-Semitic. And then another one went off. I mean, I was literally 50 meters away I was halfway down the road that you can see, and I just saw another ambulance go off, and I was like, I've got to get out of here. And it was most unpleasant, just to use a nice word.
What did you do then?
So, well, there were a lot of people coming around, and we were all talking to each other. And then the police told us that the people in the blocks, the road where the synagogue is and where the ambulance bay is, they were all evacuated. We were told we had to stay indoors. We were not allowed out. We weren't allowed out. I had to stay indoors. And it was just, there was a lot of noise, but there were no more booms. After 2:20, that was the last boom. And that's the one that I was standing right there. So it was just really not knowing what actually was going on. And then everyone obviously was on social media. And then I saw that CCTV footage of the 3 people, placing things. And it was all it's just shocking. Shocking is the word. I mean, I've lived here for over 60 years and I've never seen anything quite like this. Never.
And what have you been doing throughout the day? You've been talking to a lot of media. I know, did the police interview you or anything?
Police did not interview me. I haven't slept since the first bomb went off, the first blast went off at 1:45. It's just people have been messaging me. I've had people in Israel. My family live in Israel. My sister is a survivor of the 11th of October. She was messaging me. It's flipped over. I was worried about her 2.5 years ago. Now she's worried about me.
I heard you speak about her on an interview earlier today. She was on a kibbutz on the 7th of October.
It was on the kibbutz, and they had God knows how many terrorists came in and infiltrated the kibbutz. Thankfully, no, that's not true. There were the Thai Nepalese workers in the dairy farm. They were slaughtered, but no one who actually lived on the kibbutz was killed because their own dad's army, their own home front, went out and fought against the terrorists.
And now she's worried about you.
Now she's worried about me.
I mean,
now she's worried about me and my brothers. It's just, I've had messages. I've had hundreds of messages today. I mean, it's not just when they say you talk about something happening in London, it's on your doorstep. This was on my doorstep. I mean, you can see my curtains. I had blue lights flashing in here.
Yes.
For all the emergency services, who I have to tell you have been amazing. The emergency services were fantastic, but they shouldn't have to be here. We shouldn't have to have this. We live here happily, peacefully. Yes, Golders Green is a very Jewish area, but we have a lot of non-Jewish people living here, and we all get on with each other. We all respect each other. Hatzalah will help. If someone calls Hatzalah saying there's been an accident, Jew or non-Jew, they will help.
Yes, absolutely. And is it right to say that the ambulances were in the grounds of a synagogue or close to a synagogue?
So there's some flats, and then next to it is the bay where the ambulances are, and then there's the synagogue.
Okay.
I think it was the synagogue car park a long time ago. My parents were members there a long time ago, but now it's given to the Hatzalah Bay. That's where they've been for years. No one parks there. There's no access to the synagogue from there. The synagogue is on the front of the street. But I mean, it's just shocking, and I'm pleased. I'm pleased no one was injured, and I'm pleased that there was no structural damage to any buildings. Of course, the ambulances are write-offs, but just to think it was there, and it could have been, if it had been 50 yards nearer, it would have been outside my window.
Have you had time to catch your breath since the early hours of the morning?
Honestly, no.
Yeah.
No, I'm just exhausted. I can't bear all this, as you can see from the screen, all this tourists, you know, there's a circus, the tourists are out just coming, and right now we've got some people with flags and they're chanting, and we need to sleep. None of us in this building have slept much since 2 o'clock this morning, and now we've got, you know, sort of people pro-Israel, when I say pro-Iran,
the regime. They're not pro the regime. They're
not pro the regime.
Yeah,
so you know, they're with us, we're with them, but they're right outside, and it's been one crazy day.
They could perhaps show their solidarity by giving you a bit of peace.
Yeah, and it is nice. Solidarity would be great if I could sleep.
Goodness me.
It's just, we shouldn't have to have this here.
I mean, there have been...
We shouldn't have to have this anywhere, no matter what country, no matter what religion you are. People should live in peace. People should live in peace, and I just think, you know, there's Jews and there's Israelis. It's wrong. It's so wrong.
There's so much anti-Semitism around. The Prime Minister today reacting to what happened on your street. Caroline talked about there being no place for anti-Semitism. Do you believe that they care? Do you believe that the authorities actually get this?
I just think it's platitudes, if I'm being honest. They're not doing anything. You know, we have our own community security trust, and that's, again, it's a bit like Asylum, it's a charity. But, you know, do I see more? There was more police, I noticed, this Saturday just gone, the Sabbath just gone. There were more police out, but maybe they're in, you know, unmarked cars. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. But I just think these politicians, we've had quite a few politicians come down today, and I think it's just platitudes. And and for me, it's ignorance. People believe anything they see on television these days. Mm-hmm. And there's either I'm getting old, but there's some rubbish on TV that people just...
Well, it's social media as well. There are a million theories about this as well, and where everything is, and you know, people talking about absolute nonsense about a false flag attack and things like that. Absolutely rubbish. What do you want to happen now, Caroline, apart from those people to be quiet and let you get some sleep? As a Jew living in London, what do you want? People like me, I'm not Jewish. How can we help you?
I want people to just respect us. We respect you. You respect us. You know, if you respect Catholics, respect Jews. You respect Baptists, respect Jews. You know, we have our faith, but we live a life in England, and we're comfortable in England. You know, I mean, my family have lived here for 150 years, and you know, we work. We're part of the country. Everyone needs to respect everyone. We respect others; they need to respect us.
And what's your message to the terrorists who carried this out?
It's live television, so I don't want to.
Okay, I totally understand.
So it's just you don't understand. Just look at the facts before you believe everything that is said on social media and television. I mean, you know, and they don't understand. They don't understand. They've just got a misunderstanding about Jews. You know, long noses, big ears, lots of money. We haven't.
Listen, Caroline, I hope you get a bit of rest. Thank you for speaking to me this evening. I know you've had an extremely long time. I wish you well, and I hope will you get to see your sister soon? Will you be able to meet up at some point?
Hopefully she's going to come in the next few months. Obviously, I can't fly there, but hopefully. But we speak to each other daily, and we keep each other going. That's
marvellous. You sound like a very close family, and that's wonderful. Caroline, really appreciate you speaking to me today. Really appreciate that. That's Caroline Levy there, who is an eyewitness to the Golders Green attack. She saw what happened there. Penny in Essex says, my heart goes out to the Jewish community. It's absolutely inhumane what people are doing to these people. I can't imagine how scared they must feel. It's just totally abhorrent, says Penny. Couldn't agree more. Pete says, quite surprised Starmer didn't blame the far right for last night's arson attack on Golders Green. Dawn says Starmer's attempted sincerity is transparent, and Steve says Starmer couldn't care less. He's just paying lip service. We'll be on the debate desk with Phil, Dave, and a new panellist, actually, James Hodgkinson from the Adam Smith Institute. We'll see what they think of this and today's other main stories. I'd want to hear what you think as well. 0344 499 1000. Give me a call. Stay with us here on Talk.
I was sat in the tent and he was showing me through photos of his phone, scrolling through. This was barbaric, horrific stuff. Blokes going through walls in vehicles and then jumping out and shooting everyone. His WhatsApp picture was him with a mask on, with a gun like that.
You're in a tent with this guy?
I'm in a tent with this guy, and actually he's just showing me this stuff. I'm just thinking, this is not the kind of bloke you want to be coming to the UK.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's hear a voice note from Dave, who has sent this saying you can send your voice notes in on 0344 499 1000 on that anti-Semitic terror attack. Let's hear what Dave says.
Good evening, Peter. Reference this attack on the Jewish community in Golders Green. How about stop putting people in boxes? The Jewish community, the black community, the Pakistani community. They're all British people and should be treated as an attack on the British people.
Dave, I know exactly what you mean, and I want us all to be treated equally as part of a community, not different communities. The point is, though, this was specifically an attack on Jews, so I do think we need to talk about it in those terms. But I know exactly where you're coming from, Dave. I hate it in Northern Ireland when they say the two communities. There are many more than two communities in Northern Ireland where we're both from. There's the Chinese community, there's the Polish community, there's loads of different communities, and I'd prefer if we were all called one community together. Speaking of anti-Semitism, Keir Starmer has said today that anti-Semitism has no place in UK society. Do you believe him? This is what he said.
Well, this is a horrific anti-Semitic attack. And, of course, my thoughts, I think all of our thoughts, will be with those in the vicinity, the residents who are understandably very concerned, a Jewish community across the country deeply concerned. I've already been in touch with community leaders this morning and will continue to do so during the day. But anti-Semitism has no place in our society, and it's really important that we all stand together at a moment like this.
Just to say, the latest from the Metropolitan Police is that counter-terrorist police detectives investigating the arson attack on the 4 ambulances have set up an online portal for members of the public to share any video footage they have before, during or after the incident. Although it has not been declared a terrorist incident at this stage due to the circumstances of the incident and specialist capability within counter-terrorism police, officers from Counter-Terrorism Police London are leading the investigation. I mean, I think it probably is a terror attack, but we'll see where we are. Commander Helen Flanagan, head of Counter-Terrorism Policing London, says we are aware this attack has caused a great amount of concern amongst the Jewish and wider community in the area, but I want to reassure the public that we have officers working around the clock to identify those responsible. We've already gathered a large amount of CCTV footage from the local area and taken a number of statements from witnesses, but we know local people may also have footage or information that could be relevant, so we would urge anyone who may have information that could help with our investigation to get in touch. We will continue to work closely with our frontline policing colleagues in the area. We thank the local community for their ongoing support as we continue this investigation. And the police said that an analysis of CCTV footage shows those 3 people in hoods pouring accelerant onto the vehicles, that's petrol probably, parked in Highfield Road in Golders Green at 1:45 this morning, for igniting them and fleeing. Hours of CCTV footage is being analysed by specialist officers to trace the suspects' movements, and specialist forensic officers have been sent to the scene to gather evidence. Detectives are also aware of an online claim, the Met say, from a group taking responsibility for the attack, and inquiries are ongoing to establish the authenticity and accuracy of this claim. Well, as you've heard from Will Geddes, previously our terror expert, he thinks the most straightforward thing is this is an Iran-backed group. At this early stage, the Metropolitan Police say there would be no arrests. Anyone with information they say to contact them. I mean, it would be a story if they didn't want people to contact them. Phil Dave is a talk presenter, and James Hodgkinson is a research associate at the Adam Smith Institute. James making his debut on the debate desk. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. How are you both?
Really well, thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Phil, any surprise that this has happened? Because we've talked about these kind of attacks before. The fact is that they're shocking and they're horrible, but given the amount of anti-Semitism in the UK, perhaps not a shock.
No, I was going to say, I mean, I'm really sort of fed up of coming across blasé about this, because the truth is this is not a shock to Jewish people. Yes, I have to be honest, I don't remember anything like this before. If you look at the Hatzalah organisation, of which I know a fair bit about, sadly, because of various reasons we've had to use them in the past in my family, but Hatzalah is first and foremost, the Jewish version of St. John's Ambulance.
Yeah.
You know, it is a community-backed medical organisation that actually saves the NHS an awful lot of call-outs every single year. I think I was reading statistically, in London alone, they have responded to around 6,000 call-outs per year. Now, OK, that might not sound very much when you consider that the NHS gets thousands a day, but at the same time, that's still 6,000 less than the NHS would have to deal with. They're just a medical organisation. Why would you attack them? It's bizarre.
And this specialist equipment as well, very expensive to have an ambulance with all the equipment there, and terrorising, as we heard from Caroline, from the local community as well.
Totally. I mean, there's no other reason why you could possibly do it. I mean, the fact that they are still trying to establish whether this is a terror attack, come on, I think we all know the signs by now. I mean, I wouldn't be in the least bit surprised if Will Geddes is right. I even said this earlier on in the day. You know, we should look at the bigger picture here. How linked to Iran is all of this nonsense? And I wouldn't be in the least bit surprised that it is. But, you know, it amuses me the way that Keir Starmer goes around saying anti-Semitism has no place in society. Well, I tell you what has no place in society is the word anti-Semitism. It's racism. You know, I don't actually understand why we have to distinguish between the two. Anti-Semitism is racism.
Absolutely. James, what's your reaction to this attack?
I mean, I was absolutely horrified when the news broke, and Keir Starmer, I think, has come out strong as he needed to, but the important thing now is that his actions meet the rhetoric that we've seen. The people involved need to be locked up and they need to be identified as quickly as possible. But I think more broadly, as you've said, this sadly isn't a surprise. And what we need to do in this country is get to the root cause of extremist views, clamp down on that and stop reacting to crises when they occur, and start identifying the problems and dealing with them at source.
Makes sense. There's something else that we were going to talk about in more depth this evening before this attack happened. I was talking about this yesterday. This is a Labour-run council promoting a grotesque art display which critics say uses anti-Semitic images. I mean, it does. Critics are correct. They're factual. It uses anti-Semitic images in the guise of supporting Palestinians. This is Thanet District Council, and they're by an artist called Matthew Collings. They're called Drawings Against Genocide. Factually, it's not a genocide, and they are absolutely dreadful. You can see some of them on the screen at the moment. A Jewish visitor claims she was hounded out by the angry artist after a confrontation over the Nazi imagery. I mean, every possible trope that you could have there, Phil, of Jewish, Zionist, you know, racist stuff from Matthew Collings. He says, I would say my feeling personally is that the Zionist nonsense, I mean, all these false allegations to anti-Semitism can be conflated with anti-Zionism, has run out of effectiveness. The global feeling is that Israel is the terrifying thing, and wherever a Palestinian or Iranian or Syrian or Lebanese person is the unsafe place. I mean, that is just absolute nonsense. Images of the exhibition posted on social media show the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as a naked demon with blood pouring out of his mouth. The image has the words hypnotism and invade Iran, invade Iran. I mean, where to start with this?
Okay, well, I tell you where I'm going to start. I'm going to start by explaining to all the stupid people out there why anti-Zionism is indeed anti-Semitism. And I know people have really struggled with this concept before. They can't understand sort of why you could be anti a country and that suddenly makes you a roaring racist. It's not just the fact that Israel is the only Jewish state in the world. By the way, the size of Wales, you might like to know. It is a tiny country, right? So if for any problem you have with it, you're complaining about a country the size of Wales. Let's put the landmass to one side because, you know, a country could be any size and cause problems. Now, I don't personally believe Israel is causing problems. I think it is actually sort of doing its job, and that is to actually sort of make the world a slightly safer place. Shove that to one side. Anti-Zionism, the reason why it is anti-Semitism is because the actual concept of Zionism is the belief that Jewish people are entitled to their homeland. That is it. That is all that is all Zionism is. So when you're anti-Zionism, you believe Jewish people shouldn't have their own land. There is this bizarre notion that somehow Zionism is an ideology. Well, it's not at all. It's nothing of the sort. You actually look up the definition, it is Jewish people being entitled to their homeland.
Okay, fair enough. But what's your reaction to the fact that this art exhibition has been put on by a district council that taxpayers are paying for?
Well, I mean, I guess that's sort of where the council, and I obviously am not here to answer for them, and I wouldn't know what they would say, but I would imagine they would probably say that there is a certain amount of budget that is allocated to arts and culture in that district, and that might well be just the allocation that it was made. Now, do I personally think that councils should be giving money to exhibitions that promote propaganda? No, of course I don't. But I suppose that in the interest of free speech, I do believe in free speech. So if this is what people think, what can I do about that? I don't agree with it, though.
Okay.
I would say that at the end of the day, Thanet District Council put council tax up by a maximum of 3%. In the last budget they set. I would question how they can justify this to their taxpayers at home. The bins are going to be delayed, the potholes aren't getting filled, and yet this is where they choose to spend money. I think it's disgraceful that a local authority is willing to take, frankly, racist positions on issues like this, and I really hope we see an apology from Thanet District Council.
Thanks to Gary in Glasgow. He says, just a thought about today's incident regarding your last guest. I want to say that the anti-Semites out there are in the very loud minority. The vast majority of us in the UK stand side by side with and by our Jewish friends, says Gary in Glasgow. Couldn't agree more. Gaz says, great show as usual. Just thinking, has Mayor Khan made a statement? Has he been out to that area to show solidarity? He's certainly done a clip. He's put a statement out. But to my knowledge, he hasn't been to Golders Green. That could be wrong, and if I am wrong, please tell me that. Monica in Sheffield says, has there been any comment from him? Yes, there has. It's on his social media there, and there is a clip of him out there as well. Leslie in Hartley says, what a shocking and pointless attack, particularly on ambulances used to help the community. More words from Keir, but what does anyone think will happen with all the marches going on weekly? As Caroline Levy rightly said, we should not have to have this here. I thought she spoke very, very well, especially someone who's totally exhausted after everything that has happened since the wee hours of this morning. We're going to continue to talk about this attack throughout the programme, but we will talk about other things, including migration. We'll talk about Iran as well, and the pub banning children and blaming entitled parents. We've all been there, out in a restaurant, out in a cafe, out in a pub, and those screaming children and the sort of free range feral children and parents doing absolutely flip all. So we'll talk about that in just a second here on the debate desk. We want to get your voice on the air too, so please do give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Mark in Lincolnshire is on the line and wants to talk to Phil Dave. Mark, you're very welcome to the programme. Remember that James Hodgkinson and I are here too, but I know you have some thoughts that you want to talk to Phil about, so go ahead, Mark.
Hi there, Peter. Hi, Phil.
Hi, Mark.
Hi there. Right, what it is, it's just a query I've got, really, because I hear this all the time, and it's something that really winds me up, if I'm honest. Now, you said something that I don't necessarily disagree with, by the way. You just made a statement where you said anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism.
Yes.
Now, okay, fine. I'll go along with that. However, what I want to know is, what's your opinion on British ethno-nationalism?
In what capacity, sorry? In what way? Like, sort of, what do you mean, sorry?
Well, do you think that British ethno-nationalism is a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Do you consider it extreme right-wing? What do you consider it personally? Because I'm quite interested in this, because ethno-nationalism and Zionism are pretty much the exact same thing.
Well, they're not, because...
Yes, they are.
Well, let Phil speak, and let him say what he wants to say.
Yeah, go for it.
Well, can I just first, because I really want to sort of more understand where you're coming from, Mark. So why do you compare ethno-nationalism to Zionism?
Because it's in relation to a homeland for a people,
yes,
for an ethnic people. Now, Jewish people are ethnic people. They're entitled to their homeland of Israel. I have no issue with this. I don't even particularly have an issue with the current events going on. And I don't have any issue calling out, people attacking Jewish ambulances as a hate crime and whatever it is as anti-Semitism. I have no issue with those kind of things. What I have an issue with is that I quite often hear there's quite a narrative that tends to play out here where an ethno-nationalist, so somebody in Britain that wants a country for themselves, wants, the deportation of millions of illegals and all the rest of it from the country as being some kind of extreme right-wing, white supremacist, all the rest of it. Yet, when somebody declares himself as a Zionist, this is a perfectly acceptable state of affairs. And when you actually look...
You could have fooled me with the reaction I get, but keep going.
Well, yeah, I see where you're coming from. There are some people that are like that. That don't particularly like that.
I think Mark's made his point.
Fine, okay, so I tell you, Mark, allow me to answer then to what your point is. So, the reason why I'd say that is bunkum as far as Israel is concerned, and out of interest, this is just a yes or no, have you ever been to Israel?
I haven't personally.
No worries. Okay, that's fine. So allow me to explain that Israel itself as a country is very much founded on Jewish beliefs and Jewish values. Now, does that not mean that it is exclusively for Jewish people? No, it does not. Actually, in fact, I would argue that Israel is one of the most diverse countries in the world, let alone the Middle East. So you will actually find that there are people in Israel who come from all sorts of religious backgrounds. I grant you that primarily Abrahamic faith plays a part, so Christianity and Islam are obviously the two other main religions of the country, but there certainly are others there as well. And they're all allowed to take part in society on a perfectly equal basis. But in exactly the same way that you look at somewhere like the UAE, which is a Muslim country founded on Muslim beliefs, that is all Israel is. It is simply a country founded on Jewish beliefs. It does not mean that it is exclusively for Jewish people.
Yeah.
So that's not ethno-nationalism, is it?
Yeah, I've already known that, there's a significant Arab population in Israel.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do you equate Zionism with ethno-nationalism then?
Because they're the same principle, aren't they? Because what you're talking about, what you're essentially talking about is a homeland for an ethnic people. It's not saying that you only live exclusively with yourselves, which ethno-nationalism isn't saying either. What ethno-nationalism is saying, ethno-nationalism has two core beliefs at the end of the day. The first one being, the right of an ethnic people to self-determination, and the second one being policies should prioritise an ethnic people in their homeland.
Okay.
Right.
I don't see any particular issue with that, because that seems perfectly logical and reasonable for any people. In fact, most countries in the world operate some degree of it.
Okay, Mark. Thanks, Mark. We're just going to get a final thought from Phil on this, and then we're going to move on. Phil.
Okay, no worries. So, very quickly, I can summarise it. I can understand why Mark thinks the way he does, but the awful truth is that, again, is born out of an awful lot of ignorance that is out there. There is very much in the way of propaganda that suggests that in Israel, it's only Jewish people who benefit from the state. And it's just not true. It is a very multicultural, very diverse country, but it's just founded on Jewish beliefs. That's literally as simple as that.
Any thoughts on this, James?
Well, look, I think at the end of the day, the Jewish state is, as has already been said, a diverse, multicultural state. And I think also what we've got to remember here is that Jewish people have encountered innumerable numbers of times over history where they've been subject to hideous aggression. Any relation going back to that, I think, is wrong. And we need to look forward. As Keir Starmer said, an attack on our Jewish population should be considered an attack on everybody who calls this country home.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about another story. This is a Labour council launching an online mythbuster, urging people not to blame asylum seekers for violence against women. In a post on social media, Liverpool City Council warned against associating foreign cultures with attacks on women and girls, adding there was no causal link between asylum seeker populations and increased levels of violence against women and girls. Factually, police made 8,500 arrests of foreign nationals for sexual offences, including rape in 2024 and the start of 2025. And of course, there are specific examples which we've covered in some depth here on the programme and on the station, including the Ethiopian migrant Hadish Kabatu, who sexually assaulted a 14-year-old girl and a woman in Epping just 8 days after arriving in the UK last year. Is the Labour Council, Liverpool City Council, right to do this, James?
Well, look, I personally think people have a right to be concerned about the numbers of illegal and undocumented migrants coming over. Over 46,000 of them arrived in 2025, and the one in, one out policy just isn't working. So far, we've returned 300 and we've taken in 367. Local authorities can't afford the cost of migration. We saw that in Kent, where just last week they declared an illegal migration emergency, and taxpayers are at the moment getting less while paying more. So I think people do have a right to feel upset, to feel concerned, and I think that really it is the job of the national government to get this situation under control, secure the borders, and then we can look again at the problems we've got in this country.
Phil?
Yeah, totally and utterly. I think that sort of the way that, once again, it is blaming the locals to say, look, you've got to be more welcoming than this. We don't care who's coming into your city or who's coming into your council. You've got to be welcoming. You've got to
or you're racist for worrying about lots of young men moving into your area.
It's completely and utterly outrageous. I'm sorry, but we have seen, unfortunately, time and time again. I think, in fact, I don't know if it was when I was last on with you. Certainly, one of the shows I was on recently, where they actually had the statistics that were all in black and white for us to see as to how many crimes had been committed by people who are here illegally at the moment. I'm sorry, British public has got an absolute right to be concerned, and sorry, the local authorities are disgraceful if they don't recognise that.
Lots of calls coming in, lots of texts, tweets and voice notes too. We'll get to some of those with the debate desk. James and Phil will continue with us up until 8 o'clock. Lots more coming on the programme as well, not just about that attack, but about Iran as well. We're going to discuss that in just a second with Phil and with James. Stay with us.
I was sat in the tent and he was showing me through photos of his phone, scrolling through. This was barbaric, horrific stuff. Blokes going through walls in vehicles and then jumping out and shooting everyone. You know, his WhatsApp picture was him with a mask on, with a gun like that.
You're in a tent with this guy?
I'm in a tent with this guy, and actually he's just showing me this stuff. I'm just thinking, this is not the kind of bloke you want to be coming to the UK.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's talk about Iran now, and the parliamentary speaker there, I mean, as if their parliament is worth anything, calls reports of US talks fake news. It's asserted once again that it held no talks with the US, although Donald Trump says the two sides have reached major points of agreement. The US president said earlier there have been very strong talks between Washington and Tehran, and indeed the Prime Minister Keir Starmer saying that he knew about them as well, and Starmer saying Iran very much wanted to make a deal. But the parliamentary Speaker Mohammed Bagher Ghalibaf has reiterated the claim that no such talks have taken place. He said on X, no negotiations have been held with the US, and fake news is used to manipulate the financial and oil markets and escape the quagmire in which the US and Israel are trapped. I mean, this is a very, very interesting one, because it's essentially US says one thing, Iran says another. Another very interesting one, actually, is whether Israel's right when it says that the ballistic missiles Iran has can get to the UK, or not. That doesn't seem to be the case. Steve Reid, who is the community secretary, why he would know I'm not sure, but he certainly briefed to say yesterday on the Sunday shows that that isn't the case and ballistic missiles can't get here. We know with Israel, getting rid of Iran's ballistic missiles is a number one concern of their sort of three objectives for the war. What do you make of this, Roy?
Well, look, I think that Trump has stepped back from the brink, and I think that is obviously a good thing. Any move towards peace is good news for the economy. We know that since January the price of oil's gone up 75%, but look, major challenges do remain. We know that Trump has said that this is a 5-day stay of execution, if you will, and there are big barriers to overcome, not forgetting the fact that the Iranians want to seemingly dispute that these negotiations have even taken place. But look, leadership, nuclear policy, ballistic missile limits will all be on the table if negotiations happen. But I think the fact that for the economy that Trump is perhaps looking to pull back is a good thing.
Phil?
Okay, so a couple of things on this. First and foremost, I would say that Iran also said that the original Ayatollah Khamenei was not dead when in fact he was. So
I don't trust Iran at all. I don't trust Iran.
Yeah, Iran is incredibly good at lying, and unfortunately stupid people around the world are incredibly good at believing what they say. So I think we can take with a massive pinch of salt the fact that these talks have or have not happened. I personally think they probably are happening. Now, whether or not they're with the right people, who knows? I think when it comes to President Trump that he gets a very unfair rap. Now, there is absolutely no denying that at no point in any speech that the president does should he go ad lib, because he's rubbish at it. In fact, he comes across as a right donut when he does. But I would suggest that he is the only president in living memory that has managed to strike up the Abraham Accords. And of course, they're the ones who've actually sort of created peace with various member states of the Middle East that could never in a million years, as recently as 20 years ago, ever have thought to agreeing with peace with Israel. So I don't think that his methods should be dismissed quite yet, because I do think he does know what he's doing, and I think he's got some good people around him. But I guess that sort of, when you say about how a step closer to peace or to an agreement or a ceasefire is a good thing per se, I know you didn't use the word ceasefire, but I do want to make it very clear that for as long as Iran exists in its current form with the current regime, nowhere in the world is safe. Make no mistake, they will come after Israel first, then America, then Britain, then the rest of the Western world.
Well, this is what I worry about, because I support the Americans and I support Israel in this venture if it involves regime change. Israel's very, very clear that's what it wants to happen. Lots of people say, oh, regimes change, and sometimes this doesn't, this is a bad thing because the next regime isn't as good, or we go back as we did in Afghanistan to the Taliban. Let's hear a little bit from Trump, actually. He was speaking a little bit earlier today, and he said that Iran wants to make a deal. This is what Trump said.
So the discussions took place yesterday. They went into yesterday evening. They want very much to make a deal. We'd like to make a deal too. We're going to get together today.
I mean, why would he necessarily make up a round of negotiations? I can understand that politicians lie all the time, and they might try to create the impression that things were moving in a better way than they were, but he's either completely making up an entire round of negotiations, or the Iranians are lying. Which do you think it is, James?
Look, I think the negotiations are in all likelihood occurring. The degree to which progress has been made is something that perhaps is a little bit more open to negotiation and to interpretation, perhaps, is the word that I'm looking for.
Yes.
But what I would say again is that I completely agree that regime change is the desirable outcome here. If you look at what the US did in Venezuela, it was clean, it was quick, and it achieved the objective of a new leader. And it's a shame in many ways that that's not been accomplished quite as smoothly in this case.
The only reason that it would have been impossible is because Iran is obviously slightly further away for America to monitor, and as brilliant as Israeli intelligence is, unfortunately it can only go so far as well. So my guess would probably be is that the Iranian regime was probably more deep-rooted than either country probably first thought was the case, and they probably do realise this is a slightly bigger mission. It doesn't make it any less essential, and I would also suggest as well that as much as people would like to think that this is actually now a sign of America showing weakness, it is nothing of the sort. I would imagine that what this is actually truly a case of that there are probably some negotiations going on. We don't know who those negotiations are with. It may be involving other Middle Eastern countries for all we know, because there are other countries that do speak to Iran and who can relate to the Ayatollah and their cohorts. But I would say that if Iran think they've got the upper hand in all of this, I completely promise you they have not. There is just no way, because we've already seen that they're prepared to fire recklessly at neighbouring countries, and as soon as they do start sort of attacking anyone and everyone, they're going to get a very short, sharp and nasty shock. So fair enough, Israel and America have led the charge, but I don't think that people are just going to settle for the regime to get back to how it was.
I'll read out a few more of your messages in a moment, but I just want to talk about another story that has been sent to us and that we wanted to talk on the debate desk. The pub banning children, blaming entitled parents. This is a landlord saying, "A few have mistaken us for a crash after drinkers have made complaints. The pub that's banned children blamed entitled parents for the decision. The upmarket Kenton in Hackney, East London, which does not serve food, will no longer allow under 18s. The publican involved previously banned children after 5 p.m. and said a few have mistaken the Kenton for a creche. Drinkers had previously complained of badly behaved kids, babies crying constantly and buggies blocking walkways in Google reviews." Mr. Johansson, the landlord, said entitled parents had a lack of understanding that when you're in a public space like in a pub, you need to look after your children. We've had a couple of accidents. Kids have been running into people carrying drinks. They've been approaching dogs, poking them, stroking them, and then dogs are barking because they're feeling stressed, which is then caused confrontation with parents. Are you a parent, James?
I'm not, no.
Right, so three of us, I don't think you're a parent either, Phil. None of the three of us are parents, but I imagine all three of us have been in a pub, a cafe, a restaurant, a bar, whatever it is, and, you know, free-range children who have dreadful parents who don't control them in any way, running around. I have a friend who works in a shop, and she told me that there was a little girl who actually relieved herself on the floor, about 4 years old, and the parent said, "What should I do?" To which my friend said, "Well, clean it up." Yeah. I think would be the operative thing there. What is your experience of this sort of thing been, James?
Well, I think it comes down to responsibility, and I think across all areas of our society, people don't want to take responsibility as much as they once did. And excluding children from pubs, let's be frank, is a shame. You know, they're a key part of British culture. People need to experience that. But if parents won't take responsibility, then it's the only course of action that pubs can take. I would also like to say pubs have had such a hard deal.
Completely agree.
Over the last sort of 18 months, 2 years. Last year, a pub a day closed in England.
It's more than that. It's 8 hospitality businesses per day now.
Gosh.
Not just pubs, but other hospitality businesses as well. Phil, I don't know about you. I've been sitting in pubs sometimes and you just hear, you know, okay, screaming baby, that's probably quite a difficult one. But little, you know, free-range 5-year-olds running around and, you know, sit them down, take the screen away from them, allow your child to be bored, allow your child to actually, you know, I had to do it. I don't know about you. What was your experience?
Totally and utterly. You know, at the best, I just remember going into these restaurants growing up, and you know, we are of a similar age, Peter, you and I.
Vintage.
Where I remember distinctly going into the restaurants, was given a scrap of paper that was classed as a children's menu with some crayons.
Yeah.
And that was it. That's what I was given to amuse myself.
You were lucky to get that.
It doesn't always forfend.
Yeah.
I should dare make a racket, I would be in so much trouble.
Certainly. Did you have strict parents, James?
Well, I mean, my childhood wasn't that long ago, to be blunt, but what I would say is my experiences were broadly the same. You know, it's just a complete change in the way people regard others, and I think it's a simple mark of respect. If you've got a kid, you keep them under control, you keep them occupied, and you make sure other people can go about their day without disruption or intrusion.
That's actually spot on. Seriously, I tell you why it's spot on. It is the regard for others. That's completely gone, completely and utterly out the window.
Phil,
that was the reason why.
Knowing you, Phil, you'll have said something along the way. You'll have had a chat with a parent, or you'll have made some remark. Tell us. I've been out with you a couple of times, and it can be a little bit, as my mother would say, past remarkable. So tell us some examples of what you've said or done.
Okay, I don't think this was unreasonable, but
well, you wouldn't, would you?
No, I wouldn't. But it is true that I may have, on occasion. It's not so much actually directly to the families, although I can give a really, really good stare of disapproval if I'm unimpressed.
Hard stare. Paddington.
However, there was maybe an incident where I might have been in a restaurant not so long ago, and I just said to I asked the waiters to call over the manager, and I said, look, I'm sorry, I appreciate that some things are out of your control, but you need to understand that I, along with everyone else I'm with at this table, has come to your restaurant this evening, are paying very good money, that's hard-earned money, and we expect a certain experience. I do not expect to be in a creche environment. Will you please tell this family who had young children literally a few tables away, it wasn't even next to us, making such a racket. I just said, I'm sorry, this is not good enough. You really need to have a word with them. And to be fair to them, they did.
Yeah. Have you ever said anything, James?
Well, I mean, what I have done is I've gone into a restaurant and seen an environment like that and walked
out. Yeah,
and so we're talking about here not just the effects that it has on diners or people in the establishment already, but we're talking about the effect on business as well.
I've just had a thought of something else that happened. I'm really sorry. You're probably going to hear this really quickly. It was a cafe one Sunday morning. Went to a brunch with some friends, and there was a table right behind us, and there was a young child, she was about 3 or 4 years old, no, maybe about 4 or 5 years old, and she was absolutely screaming at the top of her lungs. The waitress, brilliant, she came over, tried to calm her down, said, come on now, what's wrong? And she was screaming in her face, literally in the waitress's face, who was actually doing the job of the parent. And I just said out loud, and I'm sorry, I couldn't control myself, I said, oh my God, have you ever seen anything so disgusting in your life? And then, of course, as the family walked out, one of the parent, the mother, just sort of said, you think it's easy having a child like that, you should try it sometimes. I said, no thanks, you're all right. And then the other chap, I assume was the father, this was in the days when I might have had a more distinctive barnet than a shaved head. He just turned to me and he said, nice hair, mate. Sarcastically, and then walked out. So yes, I have had my share of confronting.
Well, the good news is, Phil, no one's going to make sarcastic remarks about your hairstyle.
They will never do that
anymore. The now more aerodynamic Phil Dave joining us on the debate desk in those days. Phil Dave, talk presenter, and James Hodgkinson, research associate at the Adam Smith Institute. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on the debate desk. Lots more to discuss. Have you been in a situation where a kid has behaved badly in a restaurant or a bar? Would you support this landlord when he says they've got to go and they can't be part of that bar and of that eating establishment? Let me know your thoughts. Penny says nowadays the parents are too busy on their phones to bother with their children. We've seen it. And pubs with a room for the children drive me mad. Why can't children just be told to behave and do what they're told? Loads more to discuss, and let's get your thoughts on it too. 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
It's just gone 8 o'clock. This is Talk, and we're going to be reflecting on that horrendous anti-Semitic terror attack in Golders Green right throughout the programme. Whatever your view on what should happen now, please let me know. 0344 499 1000. We'll talk about the BBC, its new Director General. You'll never guess. He's a lefty who's worked for The Guardian and The Mirror. They just never learn, do they? We'll also talk to someone about Iran as well, about what's happening there and the truth of all of that, because the Iranians say one thing, Donald Trump says another. Where is the truth? The British are somewhere in the middle, certainly when it comes to ballistic missiles. So much to talk about. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note, less than a minute, please. We'll play those out. You can also send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring, all on the main number, 0344 499 1000. Really interesting thought from Dov Foreman, who we're talking to you a little bit later on in the programme about this. And he says the first thing that is needed right now is an acknowledgement from the authorities that they got it wrong. They thought they could have a soft touch approach to extremism, hatred, and the way it is policed and called out. They must now say, we got it wrong. Just one banner saying globalise the Intifada is one banner too many. Just one chant of the river to the sea is too much, says Dov Foreman, who we'll talk to later. And yes, there may well be people who don't mean this maliciously or violently, but we don't have the luxury of policing on the basis of what might be the intent behind the words. Recent actions have made that abundantly clear. The baseline must be zero tolerance to Intifada chanting, Ayatollah supporting, anti-Semitic conspiracy theory peddling in the UK. Once we have reached that baseline, we can then look to build from there. Very, very interesting thoughts. And they're coming in from you as well. David says it's highly unlikely that Catholics, Hindus or Buddhists were responsible for the terrorist attack against the British people today. So can the sectarianism be called out, sectarian terrorism be called out for what it is? I would like to ask the debate desk panel how hard it is to be a moderate Muslim in the UK, says David in the Cotswolds. Well, we certainly heard from a number of them last week on the programme, and we'll continue to. Because there's so much to discuss in all of this. I also want to hear what the Prime Minister has said. He said he's disgusted at these attacks.
Can I start by expressing my disgust at this horrific anti-Semitic attack in Golders Green in the early hours of this morning? The idea that ambulances could be considered a target is simply horrendous, and I know the impact that that will have had on so many individuals, not just those in the area, and I've been with Sarah Sackman this morning, the constituency MP, but also the neighbouring MPs, but also, frankly, the whole Jewish community across the country, not least because this is not an isolated incident, and the rise of anti-Semitic hatred is there for all to see. This is not just an attack on the Jewish community, but it's an attack on all of us, on everyone who holds the fundamental British values of tolerance and respect.
The Prime Minister also gave further reaction in this clip.
Well, this is a horrific anti-Semitic attack. And of course, my thoughts, I think all of our thoughts, will be with those in the vicinity, the residents who are understandably very concerned, a Jewish community across the country deeply concerned. I've already been in touch with community leaders this morning and will continue to do so during the day. But anti-Semitism has no place in our society, and it's really important that we all stand together at a moment like this.
Anti-Semitism may have no place in our society, as Keir Starmer does, but it does have a place in our society. Unfortunately, it does. It's there all the time. There's so many anti-Semitic people. There are anti-Semitic people in the Labour Party. There are anti-Semitic people in the Green Party. There are anti-Semitic people probably in every political party, actually. I just wonder what Johnny Gould thinks. Johnny Gould, the broadcaster who's with me now. Johnny, good evening to you.
Good evening, Pete. It's always good to see you. A comforting face in such a... I've been so upset all day, I must tell you.
Yeah, it is a very, very upsetting day. And, of course, there are so many conflicting reports about who's actually responsible for this. What we do know is that whether it is... it seems like a terrorist attack. It seems Ashab al-Yamin is responsible, linked to the IRGC, linked to the Iranian regime. And the Prime Minister says there's no place for anti-Semitism in our society. I mean, that may well be his intention, that may well be his thought, but I do think the authorities need to take a long, hard look at themselves here.
I think what I want to say to this, Peter, is that when the left of our political scene says there's no place for anti-Semitism in this country, there's a sort of scintilla of anti-Zionism which is acceptable. And I think that continues within the Labour Party. There is a sort of ideological distinction for them on the left between anti-Semitism, which is unacceptable, in other words, attacking a diaspora of Jewish people that lived here for between 50 and 300 years, and anti-Zionism, which is obviously an expression of Israel, which they kind of accept is something that they can live with. In other words, accepting the Palestinians should have an embassy here with all the rights that the United States has, that Sweden has, that Japan has. And I think that's a distinction that they never draw. And so from that anti-Zionist base becomes a kind of tolerance of this Iranian-sponsored, Qatari-sponsored racism, which we're seeing, which is now spilling over into popular discourse, into anti-Semitism. So I think they should be brave enough to say neither anti-Semitism or indeed anti-Zionism is acceptable in this country, because that is where anti-Semitism is coming from, I think, at the moment.
What have you been hearing from Golders Green today? We did speak to an eyewitness a little bit earlier on in the programme. We'll bring you a clip of that in a few minutes' time. But clearly, Johnny, there are lots of people who have stories about what happened, how it's affecting the community and so on. Just tell me what you've been hearing from that community today.
Look, people are kind of getting on with their jobs, but of course there is this frisson of anger. An Al Jazeera reporter had the chutzpah of turning up there and was chased out, not exactly in an aggressive way, but realized that he wasn't going to get his report in by about 12 or 15 sort of fairly annoyed locals, that he should have the cheek to turn up and report this. Yeah, you know, there's been incidents before. Remember that giant Mohammed Hijab turned up with a kind of giant screen and started talking about anti-Semitism there. He was chased out. And it reminds me of what Rabbi Leo D told me and others about 2 years ago. If you recall, he lost half his family to a shooting attack on one of the main roads in Judea and Samaria. He's a former British rabbi. He said, I come back here and I see that the Jewish community are sitting ducks, that we are waiting for a disaster, that things aren't normal. I spoke to a friend of mine, I've become a friend of his recently, Edvard Schifrin, a steel magnate, and he believes, and I'm coming round to this idea, that perhaps it is time for Jewish institutions to apply for a license for live arms, for live ammunition, to be able to defend ourselves, because otherwise a disaster will strike. It is a very unusual, very un-British thing to say, but I've thought about it. Rob Garson said something along the lines of, if there had been 6 million guns during the Holocaust, there would not have been a Holocaust.
Well, it's really interesting you mentioned that, actually, because when you think about the attack, was it last week in America, in Michigan, where that, am I getting this right? This is just off the top of my head, but the attack at the, where there was an attacker who used his car to drive into a Jewish centre, and he was shot, and that was dispatched very quickly. I mean, I am not a fan of guns in general, but I also know that if they are there and if people are properly trained to use them, and there are security guards at so many different Jewish institutions, well, maybe that's the extreme lengths to which we have to think now in regard to these attacks.
And I think the trigger for this, for want of a better pun there, is that what happened, do you remember a month ago where the Secret Services foiled a mass ammunition collection which was designed to create a Bataclan-style disaster in Manchester around Prestwich. Now, the Prestwich community is largely a religious community. There is absolutely no way that they could have defended themselves. And, you know, God forbid, scores of Jewish people going about their religious lives would have been murdered in cold blood, and Britain would never quite have ever recovered from that again, because there would have been a mass exodus of Jewish people scared out of their living daylights. And not just maybe the Jews who've lived here for a couple, 2 or 3 or 4 generations, fortunate enough to live here for 3 or 4 generations, because the Holocaust didn't come here. Okay, that's the one thing that we must remember. You know, parts of my family, the Gould family bit, they've been here since the 1860s in Birmingham. Like, my family goes back 4 generations in Birmingham. That is just unheard of when you talk to a French Jew, a German Jew, an Austrian Jew. Their families were destroyed and destroyed again and then moved around the world. We are thankful to Britain. There are no Solpersteins in Britain. You know, those little brass plaques, which you see on every European street.
Yeah, I've seen them in Amsterdam. I've seen them in Amsterdam. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, here was murdered the Cohen family in 1944. We don't have that here. This is something that we should be very proud of in this country. And I think we've come to a point with that Prestwich incident, which could have, I mean, we're so lucky it was foiled. I think it's time now that that we should have a license for certain big community places to be armed, perhaps on high holy days. What a sad call that is, but I've been thinking about it. I think it's time to call for it.
I wonder if you've seen this story about Thanet District Council. Campaigners say they must apologise for promoting the exhibition by Matthew Collings, which features images of Israelis as demons with blood spewing out of their mouths, showing a pro-Israeli lobby hypnotising the world. It's called Drawings Against Genocide. A spokesman for the Campaign Against Antisemitism says these images are grotesque. This isn't art but incitement, drawing on classic tropes. Modern art is often as such, if not more, about the inner feelings of the artist than about the subject. And here are the artist's inner feelings about the Jews and the Jewish state are all clear. I mean, we can see some of them on the screen there. The Home Office Minister Mike Tapp said not only is this anti-Semitic and completely unacceptable, the art is utter garbage. We know that Mr. Collins said, I would say my feelings personally is that this Zionist nonsense of making all these false allegations so anti-Semitism can be inflated with anti-Zionism has run out of effectiveness. The global feeling, he says, is that Israel is the terrifying thing, and wherever a Palestinian or Iranian or Syrian or Lebanese person is, that is the unsafe place. I just wonder what you make about the fact that this art is not only going up but being supported by taxpayer money, Johnny.
That's right. I mean, it's childlike. I mean, it's not even art. It's nasty scrawlings. My primary school daughters could draw something better than that, and certainly more kinder. There's something wrong with him in his head. And by the way, wouldn't it be really nice if he could see some of the amazing ground up community that comes out of Israel, that if he would open up his mind and have a look at this first world nation? Of course, he won't ever do that. He won't ever be able to go there. He'd want to land at Ben Gurion Airport and head straight down to, you know, Zone A of Judea and Samaria and have a crack at the corrupt Palestinian Authority and buy keffirs and go home. He wouldn't actually see the amazing Jewish city of Tel Aviv, predominantly Jewish city of Tel Aviv, all the amazing things that have happened since October the 7th, this ground-up community. You've seen it for yourself as well. Things that can be learned about this amazingly progressive society in the truest sense of the word progressive, not in a left or right kind of way. He doesn't. It's all in his head. There's something wrong with him. He should get out more. You know, Margate used to be good for your brains because they used to serve jellied eels. Obviously, they don't do that anymore, do they?
A very good point on which to end it, Johnny. Thank you, Johnny Gould there, recommending a jellied eel there. I can't say I've ever had one, I must say, but thank you to Johnny. Thanks to Steve as well, who says, so a Labour Council allows these paintings to be displayed, yet a school teacher is still in hiding. We need a government that's going to have a good clear out of this country. Their socialist utopia has failed, says Steve. Nigel's on the line from London about the arson attack, the terrorist attack earlier today. Nigel, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Well, thank you, Peter. Good evening to you and your listeners. I was earlier this morning doing a few photos of my job, and what I've gained today and over the last few weeks prior to this abysmal attack. And let's not forget, ambulances and first responder vehicles should never be attacked in the name of anything. They're there to serve communities.
Totally correct.
Thank you. And for those who don't know, Zola looks after all communities and all demographics. It doesn't have any sort of leanings left or right. It looks after everybody. And in their other base in Stamford Hill, they often work with the police dealing with stab victims, murder victims, and rushing into hospital, and of course, road traffic collisions. But I think what's important for me, speaking to people there today and people in my communities, I don't live too far from there, is the Jewish community have lost trust, lost confidence, and lost faith in the Metropolitan Police Service. Yeah. And I think it's important to say, because of course, let's not forget, it was only a few months ago that the police called out a man with a kappa on and say, "You look openly Jewish."
That's right. That's right.
You know, and I think this is shameful, because if this is another demographic group of people whose livelihoods by a volunteer ambulance service was attacked, I wonder if the police would hold back and say it's not a terrorist incident. When people in communities are scared and frightened and terrorised, that for me is terrorism.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Listen, thank you, Nigel. Much appreciated, Nigel, in London there. Quite a number coming in on both the debate desk and also this discussion about whether children should be allowed in pubs. Pete says, James, who was on earlier on the debate desk, is deluded. They don't want peace, they want Israel destroyed. You cannot negotiate with terrorists. Well, it seems that Donald Trump seems to be doing so, seems to be negotiating with the Israelis anyway. Dawn says, we were eating at a nice outside restaurant. Several children were shouting and running around us. I asked them to stop. A woman charged up and said, I bet you never had children. I said I had well-behaved children, and could she go away? Mark in Caerphilly says, hi Peter, great show. Why would anyone take kids to a pub that doesn't serve food? It's clearly a pub for drinkers and not kids. And Sam says, what happened in the days when kids sat outside on the doorstep of the pub with a bottle of cola and a packet of crisps? Well, I would very happily have them do that, Sam. The question is, of course, whether they can be relied upon to do that and not unbehave themselves. Well, I don't remember being brought to pubs necessarily as a child. I was certainly brought to restaurants and bars and things. Restaurants and cafes, and listen, if we misbehaved, I remember once when we did misbehave a bit and we were told, look, sit down, be quiet, calm yourself down there, eat your food, and stop being a menace, basically. But most of the time I would think we were reasonably well behaved, but people just didn't put up with it. You didn't put up with such badly behaved kids. What do you think about this? 0344 449-1000. Lots to discuss on all of it. We'll talk about migration in a second, because Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, wants to deport thousands of migrants before they can appeal, and the UK is facing a surge in channel crossings as the French deal nears expiry. You know that amazing French deal that stops so many people coming across the channel? Yeah, perhaps not that effective. Lots to discuss on that. We'll also discuss the new Director General of the BBC. Guess what? It's a lefty. And we will discuss Iran as well before the end of the show. Stay with us right through to 10 o'clock here on Talk.
I was sat in the tent and he was showing me through photos of his phone, scrolling through. This was barbaric, horrific stuff. Blokes going through walls in vehicles and then jumping out and shooting everyone. His WhatsApp picture was him with a mask on, with a gun like that.
You're in a tent with this guy?
I'm in a tent with this guy, and actually he's just showing me this stuff. I'm just thinking, this is not the kind of bloke you want to be coming to the UK.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's talk about the Home Secretary now. She's got to a point where she wants to use laws drawn up by Sir Tony Blair's Labour government to remove migrants as soon as their asylum claims are rejected, so they can only appeal once they're back in their home countries. The plan is to ramp up deportations in an attempt to reduce the record backlog of more than 100,000 appeals. Officials have identified 25 safe countries, places like India, Brazil, Nigeria, Kenya and Ukraine, to which people can immediately deport failed asylum seekers and criminals before they lodge appeals. Let's speak to Laurie Wastel about this. Laurie is Associate Editor of the Daily Sceptic. Do you think this is going to work, Laurie, especially in the context of the UK is facing a surge in channel crossings? The French deal is nearing expiry, and what an incredibly successful and fabulous deal that has been.
Well, quite, Peter. I think in many of these measures that are brought in, it's always, there's a lot of talk, and the question is whether it will actually amount to much. This particular plan is certainly interesting. I mean, I think the fact is that the key metric that we should always be looking at is actually the amount of asylum seekers in the country or not. And it's true that these they would still have the ability to appeal from some of those countries you mentioned if they had been deported. But nevertheless, that would be a good thing in itself, which Shabana Mahmood could point to. The fact that we're not having to put them up in asylum hotels, of course, the fact that they're not menacing parts of the public potentially. And so that the general anger about that, and also we have to mention the possibility that they might abscond before any of those final appeals and so on. But nevertheless, it does point to the fact that given that they are still able to make these appeals, what Shabana Mahmood has been unable to do with that human rights lawyer duo, Sama and Herma, at the top of the Labour Party, they're not leaving the ECHR. And so is still really this legal merry-go-round for these migrants to make these appeals, whether that's in this country or one of the ones that they might perhaps be deported to.
Yes, it's very interesting to see what is happening here as well. The boats, footage as well of a boat packed with migrants crossing the channel as gendarmes look on. This is just as after the border crossing, the border force chief has quit, Hewitt, and we know that after 18 months he realised that this was a bad job. It seems to me, and you may know more about this, but it seems to me, certainly covering these issues over the past 6 months or so, 8 months, 10 months, that Shabana Mahmood seems to have some sort of plan, but it's kind of tinkering. It's tinkering with various things, whereas many people believe a full force reform of migration is needed. I just wonder whether you think anything she has said or has done is either having an effect or will have an effect once it's properly implemented.
Well, I think we have to be fair to her. Some of these measures will have, effects in dribs and drabs, and this particular one might be a bit of a deterrent. I mean, as we know, the legal merry-go-round, one of the reasons it's actually a pull factor, that phrase that's always used, is that there's, yes, the ability to abscond, but migrants know that they will be able to stay in the country for a very long time before these appeals go through, and indeed the appeals might be accepted right at the end of that process as well. So this may have some effect there. But I mean, as you say, I think you're right that she is really sort of picking at this issue in lots of different ways and never necessarily going for the full fat option. I mean, I think we've spoken about on this show before, Peter, her reforms to the student visas. She was preventing students from places like Afghanistan and places in Africa, a couple of places in Africa as well, from being accepted on the student visas because so many of them were claiming asylum. Now, that was a sensible policy, but for instance, the country that has the highest number of student visas claiming asylum is actually Pakistan. She didn't put that on the list.
Interesting.
So again, there's this sort of, a good idea, but not necessarily followed through on.
What is happening with these talks with France, the 3-year £475 million deal expiring at the end of this month? Latest round of talks ending without agreement on Thursday. I mean, the French argue that they keep about 50% of people from coming across in small boats. I'm not sure how you can either quantify that, and especially when you have gendarmes looking on and making no effort to stop people, as we've seen in footage as soon as today, that actually there is any effort from the French to really try to stop this.
Yes, well, they seem to be surrendering to them, rather. I mean, it began at about 50%, the figure of migrants that they were stopping, but that was way back in 2023. It's fallen now to around 35 to 30. And I mean, we can see why they are dragging their feet about this and always minded to do that, because actually it helps the French out. Essentially, if these migrants are no longer in their country, the migrants themselves, know how many benefits they can get access to. We had a recent estimate from the Home Office that the amount that's paid in fees to the people smugglers is between 15,000 and 35,000 a pop per migrant. And it's an extraordinary fee to be shelling out for these supposedly, poor individuals fleeing war, as we're told. Clearly, that's not really the case if they're able to do that and pony up that amount of money. But in terms of the deal, I think Siobhan and me will need to continue to push for the French to uphold their side of the bargain. But it's always a bit of a half measure. I mean, as we talked about at the start, relying on the French when really we need to reform our own system.
I can't believe you shoehorned in a reference to the French surrendering there. I think it was in The Simpsons, actually, in 1995. Groundskeeper Willie first called them cheese-eating surrender monkeys. So very, very disappointing that you managed to do that. So we'll have to just remind ourselves that that was said in The Simpsons, Laurie. But listen, thank you very, very much indeed. Laurie Wistell there, associate editor at the Daily Skeptic. Let's take a call from Ivor in London. Ivor, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, good evening, Peter. Wonderful programme.
Thank you.
What I would like to say is that I constantly hear this sort of differentiation between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. Mm-hmm. I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm anti-Zionist. It's impossible to separate the two. First of all, it's part of our history and our being. 2,000 years ago, we were dispossessed of our land and dispersed as minorities hither and thither. So every year, and we're coming up to Passover, in the Passover ceremony, we say next year in Jerusalem. It's part of our being.
So do you think it's used
Jew, in that sense, is a Zionist?
I agree with you, Ivor. And also, when I often ask people, what do you think is Zionism? And when you actually ask people, I was on a programme, not in this station, I was on a programme last week, and the person I was sort of against kept talking about genocide over and over again. And I said, do you know what genocide actually is? Do you know what that means? And I'm not sure they do. I'm not sure people know what being anti-Zionist actually is, because to me, Zionism is very, very straightforward. I'm a Zionist, and it's very simple. It's, do the Jewish people deserve a homeland? Does Israel have a right to exist? And the answer to both those questions is, of course, yes. So if you don't believe in those things, well, you're anti-Zionist and anti-Semitic too, in my view.
Yes, I agree. That's the whole point. I think what happened was that Zionism became political at the end of the 19th century, when it was Theodor Herzl who had the first Zionist Congress in Basel, Switzerland. And then, of course, 20 so years later, the Balfour Declaration that said that the British government looked favourably on the homeland in Palestine. Well, Palestine is what the Romans called the area,
yes.
The British called. And then, of course, the horror of the Holocaust, and the world felt that there should be a Jewish nation, and in 1948 it happened. But the yearning for a homeland, or to go back to a homeland, is part of our being.
Yeah,
and it's not. Why it should be. It's become a dirty word because of the PLO and Yasser Arafat and the Islamist sector. But of course, it's nothing sinister. It's just the yearning of a people to go back to the land.
I agree with every word you say, and thank you for your call. I really appreciate it there. Much common sense speech spoken there by Ivor. Kyle's in Manchester. Kyle, I think it's maybe the first time you've given me a ring anyway. You're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
It says, good evening, Peter. Thank you for taking my call.
No problem. Good to talk to you, and let us know your thoughts.
You too. Well, it seems that we've seen for the last 2 years, we're looking for a deterrent to stop the boats coming across from France. And there always seems to be a stumbling block with one law or another. But it seems to me that there's an answer, or a possible answer, without having to change any law, and that would be, if we would say to Macron, if you still want to keep receiving the money and still want to fish in our waters, then you get your own flotilla, imaginary line, and when a boat comes to you, you tow it back to France.
And I think that to me that sounds like an awful lot of sense. I mean, why on earth would we pay the French 475 million quid and still have huge numbers, tens of thousands of people coming over illegally on boats, Kyle? It doesn't. There has to be some sort of payment by results here.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So if you shift the focus from the deterrent rather being from a legal perspective, then we have a bargaining chip with the fishing rights. And it's a simple case of, because we haven't gained anything giving them the money. So we have nothing to lose by saying, well, okay, well, we'll stop all that because the boats are still going to come anyway. But at least we're going to say something from our perspective.
There's also the more, I mean, I agree with everything you're saying, Kyle. There's also the question of why should we have to give them hundreds of millions of pounds of taxpayers' money to just implement the law, to stop people breaking the law? I mean, they should be doing that anyway.
Well, the slap in the face is basically when we see the French police just standing there smoking cigarettes, watching load themselves onto a boat and say goodbye.
Well, exactly, totally correct.
But I think the opposing view to that is, I think the next time you see Starmer and Macron on TV, just look at the beam on Starmer's face, and I swear to God, if he had a tail, he would be wagging it.
Well, he's also always releasing these statements in concert with other countries as well. Why can't he just stand up for our country? That's what I want to know. Kyle, listen, thank you for your call. Exactly. Really good first call. Don't make it the last one. Ring me anytime, Kyle, with whatever's on your mind. And what is on my mind today, actually, is what's happened in Golders Green. We're going to talk more about that a little bit later on in the programme. But for people who missed really what was a really interesting interview, I thought, with Caroline Levy, certainly from my perspective, I just shut up and let her talk. She was an eyewitness to what happened in Golders Green. This is someone who's exhausted, who is worried about what's happened. Her sister was caught up in the 7th of October terrorist attacks in Israel. Now her sister in Israel is worried about her, worried about Caroline here in London in the UK. Let's just hear a little bit about what Caroline said to me earlier on this evening. The security expert Caroline Levy is an eyewitness to the Golders Green attack and joins me now.
At 1:45, I heard a boom, but we get a lot of car crashes on here. It's a main road, and there's no speed bumps, so people go fast. And I heard a bang, and then I heard car alarms going off. I kind of was like halfway back to sleep when 10 minutes later another boom went off and more alarms, and I was thinking something's not right here. And I went out, and so if you look at that screen, I'm right at the top of that road. I went out, and then someone said to me, it's a Hatzalah ambulance, and I'm like, okay, so I thought maybe one of the some electronic failure at an ambulance, and it had caused a blast and then another blast. And then quite a few people were gathering, and one of them works with Hatzalah, and he said, absolutely, this is anti-Semitic. I just saw another ambulance go off, and I was like, I've got to get out of here.
Really terrifying to hear her account of what happened. We'll talk more about that as the show goes on. 0344 499 1000 for your reaction to that, also to what's happening in Iran and kids being banned from pubs. What do you make of that? We'll also talk about the BBC, the Hugh Edwards drama tomorrow night. He says it's hardly likely to convey reality. I think we'd probably take him a bit more seriously if he had conveyed reality and conveyed any sense of morality when it came to dealing with young men. We'll also talk about the new boss of the BBC. It'll shock you to learn he's a lefty. Stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, I want to talk now about the Hugh Edwards docudrama, which is going to be on Channel 5 tomorrow evening. The former BBC presenter says the production company did not check the facts with him first. It's really weird. Hugh Edwards seems to think he has some sort of reputation. He seems to think that people would listen to him about what actually happened when he lied and lied and lied again about what happened. Here he is talking about his mental health as well, which I have great sympathy for people who have mental health problems. I'm someone myself, but that does not excuse paedophilia, which is what he did. My deep regret and remorse for the crimes I committed were expressed in court. In pleading guilty at the earliest opportunity, I took full responsibility for my reprehensible actions. I'm not sure you did actually, Hugh, to be honest. I'm repelled by the idea that some people enjoy viewing indecent images of children. Well, you're one of them, sorry. Every image represents an innocent victim. I offer my sincere and profound apologies for what I did. He says that it's difficult to see how this approach can be considered remotely responsible or fair or be in compliance with key sections of the Ofcom Code on Broadcast Standards. I'm not sure Hugh Edwards is the high priest of Ofcom and broadcast standards. A Channel 5 spokesman says Power, the downfall of Hugh Edwards, is based on extensive interviews with the victim, his family, the journalists who revealed the story, including, it should be said, some journalists who work in this building, text exchanges between the victims and Edwards, and court reporting. It has been produced in accordance with Ofcom's Broadcasting Code. All allegations made in the film were put to Hugh Edwards via his solicitors 6 weeks before transmission. So that's on tomorrow night. Sally Jones is a former BBC presenter. Sally, what do you make of this? You're very welcome to the programme.
Thanks so much. I feel that Hugh Edwards is being absolutely delusional about this. The fact that he was presented with all the allegations 6 weeks ago, that he is trying somehow to make a distance between people who derive pleasure from seeing indecent images of young children and himself, when it's precisely what he has done. And it's almost as though he still thinks that he might be capable of some sort of comeback, which is obviously so far beyond the pale as to be ludicrous. And it makes you wonder whether whatever mental problems he has been suffering from, he continues to suffer from, and delusion is part of it. Because there's no way on earth that he's going to get a job of any sort, particularly dealing with anybody else, with children or adults or anything else, certainly not broadcasting. And I can't think that anybody is going to take his own sort of, because apparently he is reputed, although he denies it, to have got himself an agent, presumably to try to make some kind of rival documentary or rival justification for what he did, maybe with a view to, in some way, coming back into public life. And it's just not going to happen.
It is absolutely extraordinary that he feels that there is something that he can do. Disputed principal allegations made in The Sun, as the Channel 5 programme notes. I mean, it'll be very, very interesting to see that drama, which is on tomorrow night. But him saying the production company did not check with him first. I mean, Channel 5 says they did. He says mental illness is misunderstood by many, but can never be an excuse for criminality. It can, however, at least explain why people sometimes behave in shocking and reprehensible ways, and why things fell apart for me in the way they did. I mean, as someone who does suffer from mental health issues, I find that quite insulting, actually, that this would attempt to be, he says it's never an excuse for criminality, and then says basically, however, I mean, I'm not an expert, I'm not a psychiatrist, but I do know what is wrong. And Hugh Edwards doesn't seem to know what is wrong, actually, especially when he's giving lectures about the Ofcom Code.
It's almost as though he's using it as a get-out-of-jail-free card, rather the way that some people tend rather fortuitously to get religion the moment they've been caught out doing whatever the bad thing is that they've done. They suddenly have a sort of Damascene conversion, and it's as though very often people, unfortunately, for people who do suffer from mental health problems, people do play this mental health card almost too rigorously. And certainly in his case, the fact, if he's been suffering from mental problems since 2002, it's extraordinary that nothing, very little was spoken about it until the police investigation began, until the claims were made. And yet,
he did talk about it previously.
He was taking an enormous salary long after he'd been sidelined and, you know, sort of put at arm's length by the BBC while the investigation was underway. There is no way on earth that A, they should have paid him that salary, and B, that he should have kept it.
Just before you go, can I ask you what you think of the new boss of the BBC, Matt Britton? He's a non-executive director of the Guardian Media Group, and 20 years ago he was director of strategy and digital at the Mirror. This is someone who is, from the outset, going to be fairly or unfairly pigeonholed as just another BBC lefty.
He's got BBC lefty written all over him, hasn't he? CBE, member of the great and the good, MBA, Cambridge. The problem for the BBC is that they all sing from the same hymn sheet, or at least those that are the ones taking the decisions in the major opinion-forming programmes. His main problem is not just going to be the licence fee or how well he introduces digital or not. It's going to be to try to get the rest of the country who are not Islington lefties to think that the BBC has somehow managed to scale down the amount of bias that people normally associate with it. I mean, one problem is that they tend, almost without exception, to recruit their head honchos from the sort of liberal arts graduates of our top universities, particularly Oxbridge, of which he's yet another example. It's time that he started realizing that bias is the big problem for him. It's not just the money, it's not just the license fee. It's time they started recruiting people from a far wider range of backgrounds, people who are maybe known to be right-wing, known to have other viewpoints, because so much of the country is not a left-leaning liberal Islingtonian viewpoint. Completely. I mean, you've only got to see the rant that Emily Maitlis made before she was fortunately eventually shown the door, but that was considered perfectly all right. I mean, the splicing of the Trump
don't get me started about that doctoring, my goodness, as well. No, there's so much there, and then they worry about Trump suing them as well. Sally, really good to talk to you as always. Sally Jones, their former BBC presenter. I want to speak now to Dov Foreman, who's the author of Lily's Promise, who is a really impressive young man who has done so much to talk about anti-Semitism in our society today. Dov, thank you for joining me this evening. I actually read out your tweet a little bit earlier on in the programme that I think is, I mean, there's every reason to have you on the programme today of all days, but I read out your very, very strong and excellent idea that now is the time for an acknowledgement for the authorities that they got it wrong. They thought they could have a soft touch approach to extremism, hatred and the way it is policed and called out. They now must say, we got it wrong. Just expand on that theme for me a little bit, if you would.
Well, look, for decades, we've appeased the Islamist extremists. We've appeased people who have been out on the streets, who have been completely brazen and open about their Jew hatred, but not just their Jew hatred, their hatred of the West and all the values that we in this country stand for. And people should be under no illusion, by the way, that yes, they come for the Jewish targets because they're visible, because we have Jewish ambulance services and because we have synagogues and Jewish schools, which are easily kind of marked out. But ultimately, if there weren't those Jewish targets, people should be under no illusion. These haters wouldn't go away. These extremists wouldn't go away. They would target you and your families too. And people should bear that in the back of their minds when we talk about this silent majority. Ultimately, it's up for you to speak up now before it becomes too late and before they target others too. My point was that the police, the CPS, governments for too long have spent money, have chucked tens of millions of pounds just at security, just at kind of trying to have a soft touch on the Islamists and the extremists and the people who hate the Jews. But actually, they've never tried to tackle the root cause of the ideology of the fire itself. I'm also a university student, amongst the other things that I do. And on university, I see not just the huge levels of extremism, but also huge levels of radicalization, where other students, where other groups are bringing in, whether it's hate preachers or other educators who are spreading things like blood libels and pure hatred. And it's time that we got a grip on this and that we actually had sanctions against these people, that we ban the IRGC, that we ban the Muslim Brotherhood, and that we actually do something about this, not just say things, because talk is cheap, but it's time for action.
Can you tell me a little bit about how you've been interviewed today as well? Because I know you've done an awful lot of interviews. There have been various people who said various things about it. But I know you have some thoughts on this, because I like to do interviews in a very straightforward way and just ask the questions I think people at home would like to know. But there appears to have been, and maybe you disagree with this, but there appears to have been quite a lot of conflating of various different issues, as if somehow we can't just say a clearly anti-Semitic attack, perhaps by the agents of Iran, is a terrible, awful thing that we must do something about.
Well, you've hit the nail on the head there. As you say, I've been interviewed since 6 a.m. this morning, both at the site of the attack and down the line on interviews like these. And on numerous occasions, presenters have said to me, well, what about this? What about that? One even compared the anti-Semitic attack to the Nick Timothy comments about the iftar. Nick Timothy, who is raising perfectly legitimate concerns about Islamist extremism in this country, something which many Jews today will have felt more than ever. And so ultimately, as you say, there is no whataboutery. People should be able to call out anti-Semitism for what it's for. And if on a day like today, when we're talking about 4 Jewish communal ambulances targeted just because they're linked to the Jewish community, and I should mention here that they don't only serve the Jewish community, they serve anyone who
is correct.
Them.
Yeah.
And if your reaction to that anti-Semitism on a day like today is to say, well, what about the iftar? What about what's going on in Iran or Gaza? Then your head is in the completely wrong space. And ultimately, you're part of the problem. And I do worry that so much of our media, so much of the political elite do this kind of comparative exercise in which they try and compare this to local politics or to something which is going on elsewhere. And I also wonder if politicians and other media people are doing this because they're scared of losing their followers, they're scared of losing their voting blocks. And that's dangerous, not just for the Jewish community here in the UK, but for the wider society too.
We've heard the Prime Minister today say there's no place for anti-Semitism in the UK, but unfortunately, very sadly, and completely incorrectly and wrongly, there is a place for anti-Semitism in the UK. There has been a place, and actually it's growing. I just wonder, if you were talking to Sir Keir Starmer or the political class, what would your view be? What would you say to them to try to deal with this right now?
Well, the Prime Minister keeps feigning shock and surprise every time an attack like this happens. It was only 6 months ago that I came on to talk about the Islamist terrorist attack in Manchester, where 2 Jews were killed simply for being Jewish on our holiest of holy days on Yom Kippur. So this keeps happening. As you say, it keeps getting worse. And the government keep doing nothing about it. They keep promising they'll do whatever it takes. Keir Starmer was on Twitter this morning, only hours after the attack, saying that he wants to find out who did this. And if anyone has any more information, they should come to him. Well, the Jewish community have all the information we need. We know why this has happened. It's happened because we've allowed hate preachers into our country. We haven't banned the IRGC. We haven't banned the Muslim Brotherhood. And we've allowed week on week people to incite hatred against the Jewish people and to call for an intifada, to call from the river to the sea, all genocidal chants against the Jews. And we're now seeing those bearing out in our streets. And so we shouldn't be surprised. The Prime Minister shouldn't be shocked or surprised. And I should just say this isn't just the Labour government's fault. This is successive governments who have let the Jewish community down. And it's time for change. And that has to start with prescribing Muslim Brotherhood, prescribing the IRGC, and also saying that these marchers, of course, we believe in freedom of speech. People can go and march and debate whatever they want. But when that crosses over into hate speech, when there are chants for an intifada, when there are chants from the river to the sea, we've got to ban them, because we've got to a point where we've seen that this is inciting the hatred on our streets, because it's happening almost every single day. You can hear violent anti-Semitic attacks, and that's not right. This is Britain, and we need to change.
One thing I have a particular hobby horse about is the vile anti-Semitic Pascal Robinson Foster of Bob Vylan, a singer, I use the term loosely, who said death, death to the IDF. At Glastonbury, the CPS said there wasn't enough evidence to prosecute him. He then went on in Amsterdam to say that Charlie Kirk being murdered was a good thing. He then at the Al-Quds demonstration said death, death to the IDF again, which to me is just very, very straightforwardly anti-Semitic. I just wonder, when so little is actually done, particularly about people in the public eye. I'm not talking about terrorists. I'm not talking about people who've done these sorts of things who will hopefully be brought to justice. But when there is an acceptance that someone can just say that with impunity, surely the CPS, the police, need to do much more and start implementing the law.
Well, I agree. So many Jews that you will speak to on a day like today will say that much of the problem, I mean, when we implore the police to do more, much of the problem is actually they know that when they make these arrests, nothing will happen down the line with the CPS. My great-grandmother survived Auschwitz. She came to the UK to rebuild her life because she genuinely believed that this was a place where she could rebuild and be safe in practice as a practicing Jew. And that was because not only were the people liberal and tolerant and accepting of Jewish people, but also the institutions of this country were too. And she was always sure that if there was anti-Semitism, the police, the government, the CPS, all of these organizations would stand behind us and would stand for what's right. Ultimately, today, we live in this upside-down sort of world where it seems to be that when someone does these evil things, especially those in the public eye, every single time the CPS says there isn't enough evidence, or they can't do anything about it, or they don't even take it to trial. That's not right. We need to continue to push them to do more, and there needs to be reform in that section too.
Dov, thank you. I know you've an interview to get to, another one to get to, so I wish you well for that. Dov Foreman there, he's the author of Lily's Promise, an indefatigable activist against anti-Semitism. Thank you as well to Phil. He says these idiots who set fire to the ambulances need to be named and families shamed along with the group they did it for once found guilty. And David says, why doesn't France secure their land border to stop the migrants entering in the first place? So much to discuss. Keep your calls coming in, 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
I was sat in the tent and he was showing me through photos of his phone, scrolling through. This was barbaric, horrific stuff. Blokes going through walls in vehicles and then jumping out and shooting everyone. His WhatsApp picture was him with a mask on, with a gun like that.
You're in a tent with this guy?
I'm in a tent with this guy, and actually he's just showing me this stuff. I'm just thinking, this is not the kind of bloke you want to be coming to the UK.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, if you're listening just over a week ago, Friday a week ago, Dina gave us a call and she's back on the line now. Dina, you're very welcome again to the airwaves. Dina in London there. What do you make of what's happened today, Dina, especially the links to this IRGC-linked terrorist organisation?
Hi, Peter. Thank you for having me back on. It's very shocking, but not surprising. When I first heard about the news of the attacks on the Zola ambulances, obviously it was an anti-Semitic attack, but it was very intuitive to me that it was a sleeper cell or terror proxy attack. It was very obvious that this is a terrorist incident. I'm very, very disappointed that in the way that the Metropolitan Police has communicated today, that they've just called it an anti-Semitic attack. They've not called it a terrorist attack, given that the counter-terrorism police are investigating. But
yeah, they say they're trying to establish more information about it, but there has been a claim from this new organisation. Just because somebody claims, of course, doesn't necessarily mean that that's true. But many people, including a security expert I spoke to earlier, said that it is Al-Yamin, a fairly new terrorist organisation. You know, as someone who is fighting for those who want their human rights in Iran, how dangerous things can be and how many sleeper cells there are.
Yes, and unfortunately, us in the Iranian community in London and across Britain, we on a regular basis give leads that we know who are very openly working for the Iranian government. We speak to the police about it. I know friends who have gone and spoken to the police about it. We don't really know what they're doing, and it's incredibly disappointing, Peter. It's very, very disappointing. It almost feels as if something bad has to happen for the IRGC to be prescribed, or something really has to happen for any action to be taken. I honestly don't know what is driving the policy of this Labour government in terms of protecting the Jewish community, in terms of protecting the British Iranian community, in terms of protecting the security of British people. But, this is hardly surprising given that the Home Secretary had banned the Al-Quds March and then allowed it to continue to be static. So,
well, I did have Priti Patel on a few weeks ago, and I did ask her why on earth, when she was Home Secretary, did she not ban the IRGC or prescribe the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organisation? Just as we're coming up to the news, Dina, I wonder what your message is to those people in Golders Green.
My message to those people in Golders Green is that we are your ally. We love you. The British community loves you. The Muslim community, like myself, we love you. The British Iranian community love you. We really, really, really are standing side by side against them. I've never realised, I think, until the past few weeks, until I was supportive of what Israel has been doing, I've never realised the amount and the extent of racism and anti-Semitism that is really leveled towards the Jewish community. I'm not Jewish myself, so I won't really understand the extent to it, but I feel like I never really realised the actual amount of hatred. And I really, really, really feel like I want to do a lot more to be a better ally. I've always cared and loved the Jewish community, but I think given that there is so much anti-Semitism in this country, we can all do a lot more to be a much better ally for the Jewish people in this country. I heard a caller phone in the LBC earlier on and talk about how they're leaving and they want to go to Israel, and I found that really, really, really upsetting.
And I've spoken to so many people about that as well. Dina, another great call. Please ring us anytime you want to get your point across. That's Dina, an Iranian British person in London, and telling us how she feels such solidarity with the Jewish community. As an agnostic with a Methodist background, I feel exactly the same way. More to talk about this in a second.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Trump says Iran wants to make a deal. Iran says they're not even talking to America. What is going on? Netanyahu says Israel and the US are working together for the entire world, and Starmer says it's very important we defend our interests. How are we doing that? What's the best way to do it? Where do we stand with the Iranian war? We'll also be talking about what happened in Golders Green, that horrific anti-Semitic terror attack. We'll be taking many of your calls as well right up until 10 o'clock and talking a bit about the royals as well, because Meghan's heading down under and getting her trademarks in first, unsurprisingly. So much to discuss between now and 10 o'clock, and whether it's that ambulance attack, your anger with politicians, or the fact that kids have been banned from a pub. What do you think? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can also send me a WhatsApp voice note, less than a minute, please. Send them through and we'll play them out. 0344 499 1000. Keep them to less than a minute if you wouldn't mind. You can also send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring on that main number. One more time, 0344 499 1000. So much to discuss between now and 10 o'clock here on Talk. And remember, I'm here every night this week between 7 and 10. It's my new slot, and we're getting a new name for the show. It hasn't been made official just yet. I still have to talk to Creative, whoever they are. It was meant to happen last Wednesday. It hasn't happened so far, but it will very, very soon. And thanks to Andy Chandler, who says, I'm currently listening to Talk with Peter while I'm doing my house chores. I was entertained when a Simpsons reference to my the French, my favourite programme as a kid. Always a pleasure listening to Peter. Well, thank you, Andy. Yes, that was in the first time that the French were referred to, rather unfortunately, as cheese-eating surrender monkeys. That was groundskeeper Willie in The Simpsons. And thank you to everybody who's been in touch as well, including Phil, who says we need to bring back the death penalty for any terrorist attacks in this country. It's a crime against this country and its people. This is the only deterrent these people understand. Phil, I'm afraid I disagree with you. I do not think the death penalty works. I'm very happy to have a conversation about that, and if anybody wants to probe that further, please do give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Clint says, where are we going as a country? We are back in Europe now, are we? We need to drill, baby, drill. Talking about the environmental aspect and also the energy needs of this country. So much to talk about in regard to the US and Iran. I want to play you a clip from the three of the main players in this. Trump first, then Netanyahu, and then, well, not really a key player, Starmer. Let's hear what Trump has to say.
So the discussions took place yesterday. They went into yesterday evening. They want very much to make a deal. We'd like to make a deal too. We're going to get together today.
That was the President of the United States, Donald Trump. Let's hear what the Prime Minister of Israel, Netanyahu, is saying about what's going on at the moment.
Israel and the United States are working together for the entire world. And it's time to see the leaders of the rest of the countries join up. I'm happy to say that I can see some of them beginning to move in that direction, but more is needed. President Trump's call to have the international community confront this terrorist fanatic regime of zealots, that is a call not only for the security of America and the security of Israel, it's for the security of the entire world.
Benjamin Netanyahu speaking yesterday there. Keir Starmer was speaking earlier today. This is what he said.
It's very important we defend our interests, we defend British lives, but without getting dragged into the war. And that's the clear divide I've put in place. Yes, defend our interests, defend British lives. No, not get dragged into the war.
Sir William Pacey is a former ambassador to many countries, including Afghanistan, and is with me now. Sir William, thanks for joining me again. I really appreciate it. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks very much for having me.
The Iranians say there are no negotiations taking place. Donald Trump says there are, and they're going well. Who do you believe?
Well, who knows? They're both famous for telling porkies. I think the Iranians have previously denied negotiations when they've been going on. I think it's a reflection of Donald Trump probably needing negotiations more than the Iranians. The Iranians are sort of, Iranian regime's a bit of a death cult. and they are inclined to they'll be inclined to take more pain than perhaps we envisage. We're a bit desperate to get the Straits of Hormuz opened up and to get the impact on the world economy lessened, and the hit to the world economy is something we want to end.
So it's interesting. It seems that, sorry to interrupt you, Sir William, but it seems that pressure is, of course, now on Trump. And if there's one thing he does understand, it's business and the economy. Certainly postponing those strikes against the Iranian power plants would seem to play in to your theory that perhaps he needs these negotiations to succeed a bit more than the Iranians do. Has he bitten off more than he can chew here, perhaps?
I think he's certainly bitten off more than he can chew. He didn't really understand how this whole conflict would end up. I mean, he was expressed surprise that somehow the Straits of Hormuz would be closed. So I think he's keen to end the conflict. He's keener than Benjamin Netanyahu is to end the conflict. And the Iranians will certainly want to portray any end to the conflict as a victory. So there'll be lots of posturing by both sides. I suspect the Iranians would like an end to the bombing. Survival for them is victory. But the price for that will be the reopening of the Straits of Hormuz and some deal on the nuclear, perhaps going back to the deal that was on the table before the Israeli-American attack took place.
It's an interesting one, actually, because I wonder the Israelis' stated objective, one of their three stated objectives, well, the three are get rid of the nuclear weapons, get rid of the ballistic missiles, and also, have regime change. As we're talking about regime change, I'll maybe talk more about ballistic missiles in a second, but as we're talking more about regime change, do you think that's something that Trump really wants or desires? What would victory look like for him, do you think? Or is it just impossible to know?
Well, I think he's come to realise that you can't do regime change from the air. Bombing in the air won't change the regime. I think we'd all like to see regime change. This regime in Iran has been a destabilising force in the region. They've pursued nuclear weapons, which nobody wants them to have. So, and the Iranian people, I think, have shown that they would like regime change, but it isn't going to come about through a bombing campaign. So they're not going to. They're going to have to achieve something less than that. I think the Israelis want to take this window of opportunity to weaken the Iranian regime to the extent it can. I mean, they've already achieved their aims. Lessening the ballistic missile threat, attacking Iran's military infrastructure. They have probably achieved their aims. They will continue to do this as long as the Americans have got the appetite for it. But I think the American appetite is beginning to diminish.
We spoke the other night, Sir William, about some of the other different aspects of this as well. We're hearing, again, conflicting reports about ballistic missiles. The Community Secretary here in the UK, Steve Reid, has said that ballistic missiles, he has seen no intelligence to suggest, not that he necessarily would as Communities Minister, but he has certainly not been told that there are any ballistic missiles that can reach London or the UK in general. What do you think the truth of this is?
I think it's pretty clear from our own intelligence agencies that the Iranians do not yet have the capacity to send a ballistic missile to the UK with any sort of payload. And you can see that their attempt to hit Diego Garcia, one missile fell short and the other one was shot down. That's well short of the distance to London. I mean, it suits the Israeli Prime Minister to play up the threat to other countries, and that's what he's doing. He's trying to get other countries to join in their attack. But I don't think there's a credible threat from ballistic missiles. The threat that the Iranians pose to Britain is much more a terrorist threat.
Yes, and we have certainly seen that today. I just wonder what you make of that in regard to the allegations, certainly, of this new terrorist organisation that appears to have, well, it has claimed responsibility for this dreadful anti-Semitic attack in Golders Green.
Yeah, it's an appalling attack against the British Jewish community. You can never quite know for sure when someone claims something.
Yeah.
The Iranian regime have not been historically willing to claim. They preferred the ambiguity. So it's not quite sure whether it's linked to Iran or whether it's linked to just anti-Semitism or what. But you can't take at face value the claim. That's being investigated by the authorities, who will be seeking to track down the perpetrators and punish them.
How much danger do you think the UK is in this, given that there is a defensive capability? And also, maybe you could assess to me, and maybe sort of bring us into what might have happened behind the scenes in regard to Diego Garcia, because there's quite a lot of criticism of Keir Starmer for not mentioning this, not coming out and saying, look, they attempted to attack Diego Garcia and he let the Americans essentially confirm that. Obviously, there's a very, very big controversy around the Chagos Islands and all of that. I just wonder if you could kind of decode that for us and let us know your thoughts on it.
Well, I think it came out pretty quickly. The Americans would have been the ones defending Diego Garcia. It's their airbase that's there. We currently own it, about to transfer sovereignty to the Mauritians, but we will still own the base on a long lease. So it's not surprising that the Americans are responsible for shooting down the missiles and announcing it. I don't think there's any great cover up there.
Okay. In regard to what Trump is saying here, he's talked about the price of oil. It's fallen dramatically after his comments as well. We know that the Strait of Hormuz remains open except to vessels linked to Tehran's enemies. It's just not safe at the moment, is it, for really any vessel? I just wonder if we are any closer, you think, to getting that open again and to the economic effects of this actually abating to some degree.
Yeah, I mean, the insurance price for taking a vessel through the Straits of Hormuz is prohibitive. And although the Iranians have said they're only going to attack vessels that are of nations that they regard as hostile, that's quite a lot of nations. So we're going to need agreement. I mean, the Iranians haven't done very much physically to block the Straits of Hormuz. It's the threat to shipping. Mm-hmm. So that threat needs to be removed. There will have to be an agreement. And I think, if Donald Trump genuinely wants an agreement, that agreement will have to involve freedom of navigation in the Straits of Hormuz. It will have to be an end to the bombing, and there'll probably have to be some agreement similar to what was on the cards before the bombing started about no enrichment, no nuclear program, and something on ballistic missiles. But that's going to be very difficult to achieve. But the Iranian tactic has succeeded in creating a global crisis, a global economic crisis, in return for as defense of their homeland. When the Americans, they can't really attack America, but they can attack the American economy, and that's what they're doing.
So, William, had diplomacy not worked out, you could have easily been a broadcaster. Honestly, you bring such incredible clarity to the situation for me, and I really, really appreciate you joining us on the programme. That's Sir William Patey there, who is former ambassador to Afghanistan, amongst many, many other countries, Iraq as well. He knows the Middle East extremely well and the world extremely well. Chris is in Derbyshire and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Chris, what would you like to say this evening?
Yes, what's concerning me with regards to this anti-Semitic attack in Golders Green is that the BBC have been quick to call it an arson and a hate crime, but they've not called it what it is, a terrorist attack.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Well, it's even worse than that with RTE, the Irish broadcaster, said it's an apparent arson. I don't think it's an apparent arson. I think it's very, very straightforwardly an arson. Well, the reason the BBC won't call it a terrorist attack is because it hasn't been deemed a terrorist attack by the Metropolitan Police. We know that it is a terrorist attack. There's a terrorist organisation that has claimed responsibility for it.
I mean, at the end of the day, if I may say, these people didn't need explosives. They knew that they were attacking vehicles with compressed air canisters on board, and they knew that those canisters would function as good as any explosive. They knew that.
Well, and absolutely terrifying for the people involved. I interviewed someone earlier on who saw it all happen. Chris, how do we move on from this? How do we deal with this? How do we deal with anti-Semitism in our society, Chris?
I think that the best way to deal with it is realise the different strains, because I believe that we've got a triple threat going on of the far left, Islamism, and then whatever sad remnants of the extreme neo-Nazi right remain in this country. And I think we need to effectively deal with the two worst strains at the moment, which is the far left and Islamism, and then go after the remainder of whatever threat the fringe right poses. But I think we need to actively identify the sources of the various threats and then target it through education and go about arresting the ideologues. I mean, for example, if you look at the Al-Quds March, the fact that these ideologues were allowed to spread their poison and nobody really cared.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day...
There were some arrests that happened at the Al-Quds protest, but not nearly enough. I mean, Pascal Robinson Foster should have been arrested, as far as I'm concerned, and charged. But we know my views on him. Chris, listen, thank you so much for your call. Lots of common sense in that. Chris in Derbyshire there. Whatever you want to say, however you want to say it, let me know. 0344 499 1000. You can have a call on the air with me like Chris. You can send me a voice note. You can send me a WhatsApp text message. I'll read some of those out in a minute or two. We're going to talk about Meghan next because we haven't done a royal story in a while. So it's about time we speak to Rupert Bell about that and what Meghan's been up to in Australia, or is going to be up to in Australia. So stay with us here on Talk.
I was sat in the tent and he was showing me through photos of his phone, scrolling through. This was barbaric, horrific stuff. Blokes going through walls in vehicles and then jumping out and shooting everyone. His WhatsApp picture was him with a mask on, with a gun like that.
You're in a tent with this guy.
I'm in a tent with this guy, and actually he's just showing me this stuff. I'm just thinking, this is not the kind of bloke you want to be coming to the UK.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Oh, we're back. Oh, that was a little bit faster than I thought it would be. I just nipped out for a minute, so I'm afraid I've just plugged myself back in, so there we are. Maybe Sam could have played a trail, but he didn't get there in time anyway. Marvellous though, Sam, the tech up is. Sometimes you do need to nip out anyway. Thank you to everybody who has sent a message in, including Leslie, who says Starmer still refusing to commit to increasing defence spending but in favour of welfare spending. Starmer says we are not in the war, then what are our planes and pilots doing, risking their lives doing shooting down drones? Well, lots more to discuss on all of that, and you can make your point by giving me a ring on 0344 499 1000. I want to talk about Meghan now and what she has been up to in Australia, apparently getting her trademarks in first. Rupert Bell has all the details on this, our royal correspondent. Tell us about this, Rupert.
Yes, well, because obviously we know next month the Sussexes are going to Australia. And one of the things that we've been hearing about is how she's trying to move her as ever brand into a more international aspects. One of the reasons she cited for the split with Netflix is that she wanted to be more international. Well, I'm not sure there's any more international brand than Netflix, but you make of that what you will. So what she's trying to do is just sort of line up some of her products as potentially being able to be sold in Australia. Now, the history is that back in 2018, the Sussexes did a tour when they were still within the royal family fold. It was then at the end of that tour that it's reported that Meghan said, why wasn't I paid for this being out there? Because obviously they were fated along the way. And that was the sort of slippery slope to them deciding to no longer be part of the royal family in a formal sense. They are now trying to re-evaluate themselves from a business perspective. Don't think it's going to be easy, because what I'm being told from people I know in Australia, this is going to be an underwhelming visit from the Sussexes, because there is a great apathy about it within Australia. So it'll be very interesting to see how their relationship goes with the Australian people, and how she may be able to turn it round so that actually they will actually feel that they should embrace the kind of products that she wants to sell.
Yeah, it's interesting on Netflix as well. You mentioned Netflix there. They seem to be running out of time, patience, whatever it is, with the Sussexes. Of course, we know the Polo documentary went really, really badly. And aside from the documentary, which both of us were sort of forced to sit through for work purposes because they told their story, certainly their truth, they would say, the as ever lifestyle products, the Netflix deal, it all seems to be slightly fading away a little bit. And also many people asking questions about how many jars of jam have actually been sold.
Yes, and this is the issue, because they're always putting the sold out sign, but then that can also be a marketing ploy to sort of create an interest, because if you see something is sold out, you might go back.
Yes.
But we're also hearing that, yes, Meghan is appearing at a lifestyle weekend, and you can apply for tickets, but it appears that it's pretty easy to apply for tickets for this 3,000 Aussie dollar gig that she is going to be part of in a swanky hotel in Sydney. So they are trying to make themselves appear more international. But Australia is a tricky, cynical market at the best of times. They may think they've got more important things to be worrying about than rebuilding the Sussexes' career. Now, there is talk from a Harry perspective that Australia may be looking to host the Invictus Games, so that might be part of the reason that he's going. But ultimately, for Meghan, it's all about trying to build her brand, which has, well, I don't know how it's done in America. We can't get the products here, I don't think. But it's been pretty underwhelming that now recently we've seen her flower arranging, producing a basket with a baguette that seems to be placed in a very odd looking manner with some jam and things in it. It all looks a bit tacky.
Yeah.
And
although
will the
point,
Australians buy it?
Well, the point is, I suppose, if they don't buy it, and if you don't have a source of income, well, then you go down the extreme route of people like Fergie. This extraordinary report from the Mail on Sunday over the weekend that she was going to take part in a reality TV show to clone the Queen's corgis. I mean, how desperate must she be to even have considered that?
Well, that just sounds off the charts wacky and, you know, awful, disrespectful for the Queen, who actually thought that Fergie gave them because she saw that she was very keen to look after them, was given as a gift. But then to even contemplate, if these reports are true from the weekend, to produce a program to clone corgi, the Queen's corgis. I mean, well, okay, reality TV and programs, there's a lot of desperate stuff out there, but this sounds scraping the barrel as beyond. So it just does show that Fergie is in a desperate situation over the years, and now there's talk of her maybe appearing on Traitors to try in America, that is, so she knows that she's got to find a way out of it, but I'm not sure that she's in a position to even be signed up for something like that. But she does have, if you look through her career, an amazing ability to bounce back.
Yes.
But the Epstein sort of saga and the files may suggest that even for someone with Fergie's bounce back ability, this may be a step too far.
Bounce back ability, great word. Tell us about William and his Christianity, because he's going to the enthronement of the Archbishop of Canterbury this week, but he's made it clear that he does have a faith of his own. Obviously, he's going to be someone who's going to be the Supreme Governor of the Church of England at some stage in his life, by the look of things.
Yeah, and you can see why this article's come out, because, as you say, it's a historic moment, because, you know, we've been having Archbishop of Canterbury in this country for 1,400 odd years. So, and it's the first time that a woman will be enthroned as Archbishop of Canterbury. So it's a landmark moment. And if you think about it, now the King never attends the enthronement of the Archbishop. It's historically never been done, as far as I'm aware. So for the Prince and Princess of Wales will be attending. And if you think about it, now, if the current the new Archbishop of Canterbury sticks around, say, for 10, 15 years, there's every chance it will be her who will be anointing William as the new monarch, because that is what happens in this country. So it is important. I believe they've been having discussions and they talk on a regular basis. But his quiet faith is that, I think what we're talking about, he's not a bells and whistles Christian who says, I go every Sunday and go to church. But I think his quiet faith, in what he's alluding to, is how he understands the significance of his role as head of the Anglican Church. Now, how that manifests itself with his Christian beliefs, we don't know. But his quiet faith is, I suppose, actually mirroring what a lot of us have out there, which is a quiet faith. No one's saying, you know, sort of just getting on with it. He's a person who will turn up for high days, holidays, and important religious services, Easter, Christmas, and other events that he would be expected to attend to. But I do think it's important. You can tell why this article came out as it did, given that this is a very significant
wasn't an accident. Wasn't an accident in terms of timing. No. Yeah.
No. Not at all. Not at all. Okay. Absolutely planned, in the sense that it's 3 days before the enthronement and he will be there, and it sort of cements the fact that he understands the significance of his role within the Anglican Church.
Rupert, always good to talk to you. That's Rupert Bell, our royal correspondent. Thanks for joining me on the programme this evening. Catherine has been in touch from Australia. Great to hear you watching and listening there. Speaking as an Australian from Melbourne, we are not interested in Meghan. Stay at home. We're not interested. Well, Catherine, I'm delighted that you're interested in this programme and that you're tuning in. And a very happy Tuesday to you, because that is the day where you are. Still Monday here, of course. And it's still Monday in Washington, where Donald Trump has arrived back in Andrews Air Force Base. We will be talking more about him, about Iran, about Netanyahu, and indeed about Starmer with Errol Moorcoach, who is from Republicans overseas. I want your thoughts on everything we're talking about today, whether it's Starmer, whether it's that horrendous ambulance attack, or banning children from pubs, whatever you want to say. Do give me a shout. Plenty of time in the next half an hour to have a chat on the air. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
And we'll have a chat with Petri just before 10 o'clock. She takes over between 10 and 1. And as you were perhaps hearing there, Talkback will be between midnight and 1 a.m. It's incredible. I've covered that show, I think, 2 or 3 times maybe in the past. And you always think, hold on a second, you know, we don't have many calls maybe, or are we really going to fill a whole hour with calls? And then as soon as the midnight hour strikes, as soon as Big Ben strikes 12, the calls just light up. We've plenty of calls, of course, coming up between now and 10 o'clock. And whatever it is you want to talk about, do give me a shout on 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk to Errol Moorcoach now, who is the spokesman for Republicans overseas, on what Donald Trump has been saying. He says Iran wants to make a deal. This is what the president's been saying.
So the discussions took place yesterday. They went into yesterday evening. They want very much to make a deal. We'd like to make a deal too. We're going to get together today.
The Prime Minister of Israel says that the US and Israel are working together for the entire world. This is what Benjamin Netanyahu said yesterday.
Israel and the United States are working together for the entire world. And it's time to see the leaders of the rest of the countries join up. I'm happy to say that I can see some of them beginning to move in that direction, but more is needed. President Trump's call to have the international community confront this terrorist fanatic regime of zealots, that is a call not only for the security of America and the security of Israel, it's for the security of the entire world.
So we've heard from Netanyahu, we've heard from Trump there. Errol Moorcoach is with us now. Errol, you're very welcome to the programme. It's fascinating to see what Trump is saying versus what the Iranians are saying. Both of them perhaps not always entirely truthful. Do you think these negotiations are happening or not? And what's the American public saying about them?
I think for sure there's a back channel door open on both sides out of necessity. We've had reports out of Ankara that there's been at least substantial overtures. Now, that said, who exactly are we negotiating with? Trump has alluded to sort of a mystery figure. He won't say who it is so the guy doesn't get killed. He also very well might not exist, because that might be obfuscation by the Americans as they go in a different direction. Certainly, the new Ayatollah's son doesn't seem to have been able to make any public appearances, and there are some situations. I'll take an example. On
suggestions, he might even be dead.
He might be dead as well. And the fracturing inside is notable when you see 2 ballistic missiles shot at Irkut Air Force Base in Turkey. Now, that's a NATO ally. Now, those are 2 missiles the Turks shot down, but Iran has come out and said they were shot by revolting commanders, somebody who was outside of the chain of custody. So right there, you can see that they're using that as a deterrent, but also a distraction or excuse. It does mean there's fracturing internally. So for Trump to find, I think, the right person to negotiate with, and of course, other people who are hardliners don't want any negotiation. So of course people are going to come out and say there's no talks, but I do believe there are talks, and I think perhaps the 5-day ceasefire, at least from the American end, might hold on. I'm not sure I can speak for the Israelis.
How much patience do you think the American public have in this, especially when you say about the Israelis there who may or may not observe that 5-day ceasefire when it comes to Iran, especially if there are authorised or unauthorised or who knows what ballistic missiles perhaps coming in the opposite direction from Iran?
Well, from a public perspective, we're looking at thin ice. Now, they're okay with airstrikes. They're okay with tactical special forces, like the Delta Force extraction of Maduro. Those kind of things can be tolerated. The far isolationist wing of MAGA, they've already been disillusioned by this event and have tucked tail and left. But for the rest of the people, they're just concerned about seeing their sons and daughters being put on the ground in any massive way. Now, I think if Trump was to surge 3,000 to 4,000 soldiers and try to take Karg Island and that didn't go well, that would be a disaster and probably something he's not willing to risk. So he's definitely walking a fine line with the domestic people, especially with the midterms around the corner.
Yes, very, very interesting. Let's hear a little bit from our own Prime Minister today. Keir Starmer said this.
very important we defend our interests, we defend British lives, but without getting dragged into the war. And that's the clear divide I've put in place. Yes, defend our interests, defend British lives. No, not get dragged into the war.
Keir Starmer there, the Prime Minister. Errol, what do you make of that, especially as someone who keeps a close eye on what goes on in this country as well as in America? Because there's this weird kind of relationship between the US and the UK at the moment, isn't there?
There is, and I'll say, I mean, I work in the defense industry, so while Keir Starmer might speak for the state, he certainly isn't speaking for the British defense apparatus, which has been very involved in a lot of segments of wars. The British have tried to be hands-off. In this situation, I can commend Starmer for at least trying to manage an unknown situation. He's not a renegade politician like Trump. He's not somebody who plays live ball. He plays pre-scripted games, and this is very out of his league. So I think it's probably, playing to his strengths to step back. However, you have to wonder, as Trump loses faith in certain allies, at least publicly, he's on the back end. It's not as bad as it looks in the front end. But certainly, I have to respect Starmer for holding to his guns. Now, Trump is now putting people in a bad spot, at least from his side, saying, well, look, the oil from the Strait of Hormuz is going to Asia and going to the EU. What if we just leave? Are you going to not do anything? So I think it's been a bad taste in his mouth, especially from Diego Garcia until now. And Keir Starmer needs to step in some way, at least show the Americans that he's the ally that I think we should be with each other.
Errol, great to talk to you as always. Errol Moorcoach there, spokesman for Republicans overseas. What do you make of what he had to say there? We're going to take a load of calls between now and 10 o'clock. Whatever is on your mind, whatever you want to talk about, whether it is these horrendous ambulance attacks by, we think, Iranian terrorists, whether it's what Errol was talking about there, whether it's this Hugh Edwards reality TV drama he says is hardly likely to convey reality, or kicking kids out of pubs. Whatever you think, whatever's on the tip of your tongue, let me know. 0344 499 1000. Plenty of calls and a sprinkling of Petri Hoskin next here on Talk.
I was sat in the tent and he was showing me through photos of his phone, scrolling through. This was barbaric, horrific stuff. Blokes going through walls in vehicles and then jumping out and shooting everyone. His WhatsApp picture was him with a mask on, with a gun like that.
You're in a tent with this guy.
I'm in a tent with this guy, and actually he's just showing me this stuff. I'm just thinking, this is not the kind of bloke you want to be coming to the UK.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to the person who has messaged me to say double bluff from Trump. If nothing happens in the next 24 hours, he's going to destroy the energy of Iran. So basically, when that happens, it's the Iranians' fault, not his. They're just not negotiating with them. Very interesting. It's hard to know who to believe, to be brutally honest. I think certainly when it comes to a 5-day ceasefire, I'll be very, very interested if I'm sitting here on Friday night saying, you know, isn't it great the ceasefire has held? It'll be very interesting to see what the Israelis do as well. I want to talk a bit about the ambulance attack here in the UK. There is this Iranian terror group that has claimed responsibility for it. Andre is in Farnham and has given me a shout about this on 0344 499 1000. If you want to give me a ring in the next 18 minutes, we'll try and get you on. Do give me a shout on 0344 499 1000, which is the number Andre has rung. Andre, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hello. Nice to speak to you again.
Thanks
for having me on again.
Sure.
Yes, regarding the ambulance attack, again, another appalling attack. I felt that Keir Starmer and Sadiq Khan were a bit late to address that. I expect them to come out straight away.
It doesn't seem that Sadiq Khan actually went there by the look of things. He certainly put out a statement. He put on quite a lengthy statement. He certainly condemned it. He did a little clip on air, but it doesn't seem as if he went there.
Yes, I think it's it's a bit of a wet kind of approach to it, really. I kind of feel that in the last conversation we had about the extreme Islam thing going on in this country, in actual fact, the more I look at this now, sometimes I wonder, is it really extremist in the Pakistani community, but particularly from Kashmir? They all seem to be operating and mobilising together in these sort of attitudes towards all of the things that they want. And sometimes I wonder if basically Keir Starmer's stuck between a rock and a hard place, because he's trying to keep, obviously, these elements of these people happy in this country, and then obviously he's got to try and deal with the anti-Semitic problems as well.
Do you think he gets it, Andre? Do you think he understands what the scourge of anti-Semitism in this society, or is he just looking over his shoulder at the Green Party, at your party, at Muslim bloc votes? There are sometimes bloc votes, sometimes there aren't. It depends. I mean, does he get it? Does he understand what his duties actually are?
I don't think he does, and I definitely think it's all of those things colliding sort of in his lap, really. In actual fact, I don't think he really knows what to do about it, because he's a human rights lawyer. His instincts are probably one thing, and then obviously being a leader is something else, and I think that's where he struggles as a PM. Because sometimes as a PM, you have to step out that box and serve your country, even though it might be unpopular with some of the people.
Well, it's called leading, Andre, isn't it? It's called, show us the way to go. And I must say, I've often... Sorry, I'm just going to say, Andre, just briefly, I mean, the politicians that I maybe not admire, but certainly saw as leaders, I certainly admired Margaret Thatcher, but Tony Blair, didn't admire him, but I certainly saw him as a leader, would occasionally say, look, you're going to disagree with this, but I am going to lead you. Come with me. And I never get that sense with Starmer. It's always reacting.
No, you never really seem to know what he's going to do until he really has to do it. And I think Lord Herman in the background isn't much help either. I mean, this guy's absolutely fanatical when it comes to human rights, and I think it's nothing wrong with being sort of like wanting to do really good things with human rights, but it all depends on what it's costing other people. So
and it's also whether international law actually is better and is something we need to look at before we look at the laws of our own country and sovereignty in our own country. And I would suggest that the facts demonstrate that Hermer sees international law as far more important than the law of this country. He may dispute that, but from what he says and does, and he made another speech today, that appears to be his view.
I absolutely agree with you that he sees international law as more important than domestic law. He's obviously looking at a much larger global consensus. In actual fact, sometimes I wonder if we're actually dropping into some sort of global socialism, around these laws and these human rights.
Certainly a lot of people who worry about that, Andre. Listen, I've got to bring in a few other callers, but I really appreciate your call this evening, Andre, and do give me another ring on another occasion. Nick is in Bushy in North London. You're very welcome to the programme, Nick. What would you like to say?
Hi, good evening. So first of all, I've been listening to your show for quite some time, and thank you for taking my call.
You're very welcome to the airwaves. What would you like to say?
So, I was listening to what Keir Starmer has been saying, that, he's here to protect the British people, but yet he keeps on failing the Jews in aspect when it comes to protecting the British people. They're just as much British as anybody else.
Absolutely.
But yet they keep on getting terrorized by either the marches of Singh to the river to the sea, this attack just now in Golders Green. So he's very inconsistent because it seems like he only cares to protect a certain group of people, but not anybody else.
It's weird, isn't it? There seems to be this sort of vague concept of him saying, well, yes, certainly anti-Semitism has no place in our society. But the fact is that it does. It does have a place in our society. I don't want it to have a place in our society. It shouldn't have a place in our society, but it's there. It exists, and it's manifested in so many different ways. We have a Labour Council, for example, paying for this horrendous anti-Semitic art. For example, a story we've been discussing this evening. We have these parades facilitated from people who support Hamas and Hezbollah who aren't arrested. This just goes on and on and on.
Yeah, but that's exactly the point that well, everybody's trying to say.
Yeah.
Like, at some point, he's got to turn around and say, you know what, I can't just be kind or be careful with the way he responds to a certain group of people, but screw the rest, pardon the French. It's just, he's so inconsistent, but he keeps on saying things, but bottom line is it's empty words because nothing comes into action.
Yeah.
Like he never implements anything.
I think that all of that makes perfect sense. He talks a good game, but rarely actually does anything. Nick, thank you for your call from Bushy. Sharon's in London and has some thoughts on the attack as well. Sharon, you're very welcome to the programme. Go ahead.
Hello. What a sombre night for London.
Totally. And for the country, Sharon.
And for the country, you're right. But, you know, as a Jewish woman who's grown up here, my father, we've grown up in generations here. It's now time to leave, unfortunately.
You think so?
Yes, absolutely. I will not raise my family in a situation like this. And the irony is, all this does is increase the immigration into Israel, makes it stronger, makes the economy stronger. And that's what's going to happen. Keir Starmer, if you are listening, you have absolutely failed the Jewish community of England. You are a disgrace. And if he doesn't do something, this isn't about Jews. And I think that's what's missing from the equation. This will, you know, this has started with the Jews, but this will go for Christians and everybody else, and it will go down.
You're absolutely right, Sharon. You're absolutely right. The Jews are the canary in the coal mine here. And we saw even a couple of weeks ago on this programme, we were talking about a Hindu festival, the festival Holi, which is a lovely, really family affair. People throw coloured powder at one another. I took part in it. I reported on it actually in Belfast on one occasion. It's a lovely thing. Islamists across the road from a Holi festival, which was HOLI, I should say, the Hindu festival, wanted it banned because it was another religion that they weren't happy with. There was an Islamic centre and some Islamists wanted that banned. That was in northwest London. That is just one example in the last few weeks, and you're absolutely right that we need to stand up. And this is why I try to talk a bit on this programme, as much as I can, really, about anti-Semitism, because it's not just that it's totally, totally wrong, full stop, but there's more to it.
I think what's shocking is, you know, I'm now middle-aged. I've lived here my whole life. I've gone to school here. I've had Jewish friends, non-Jewish friends, Indian friends. We were all able to live coherently with each other. You know, I can remember as a child my parents working on Christmas Day to give a Christian the holiday off, and it was reciprocated on Rosh Hashanah, our holy day, and we all lived very harmoniously here. Yes, we had some problems, but we didn't have this level. This is off the charts.
Why has it changed? Why has it changed, Sharon?
The demographics changed. The demographic in England has changed, and the majority vote is now a Muslim vote. And Keir Starmer is in a very difficult predicament. Whether he does believe it's out of control or not, there's nowhere to move. There's nowhere to move. He can't do a thing. He cannot move. His MPs, the constituencies, all of it. I mean, look at what we have in Parliament at the moment. We have how many independents?
I think it's about 8 or 9, but certainly there are about 5 pro-Gaza independents. There are also quite a number of members of the Green Party as well who would have similar views.
Correct, and I know that this is a democracy, and I know this is a democracy, and that's fair and everything else. But when you're picking on one segment of the population, you have a bigger problem, and that's the bottom line. Keir Starmer is a disgrace. He can say whatever he wants. He's let down the entire Jewish community. And in fact, he's let down England. And
What should he do right now, Sharon? Can he claw this back? Is there any way?
Can he? No, I don't think so. I really don't. He can't move. Where is he going to move? He will lose MPs, he will lose the vote, and he doesn't want to, which I can understand to a point. No, there's no way to claw this back. Either, the lid's off now. This should have been tackled way back in 2023 after the October 7th
yes,
happened.
Yes.
And it was allowed to fester, and it's been allowed to fester and normalise. It's normal now. How many times you turn on a TV or listen to the radio, there's another anti-Semitic attack. You don't understand what it's like. I work in a school, in a synagogue. We lock down. We have to lock down. We walk around with security radios on us so we can contact CST. It's horrendous. Why in England in 2026 are we expected to live like this, and our families are expected to live like this? I paid taxes my entire life. My parents have paid taxes. We've lived here for generations. This is not okay.
Sharon, you sound exhausted.
I'm exhausted, I'm scared, and I'm fed up. That's the honest answer. This should never have been allowed to happen in this country. Not only that, it's humiliating for the country. If you could see the news being reported in Israel or America, it is absolutely horrendous. I think I haven't looked properly, but I think there's even an alert not to come to England now. It's unsafe for Jews, and that is the reality.
What are you going to do, Sharon?
We're going to Israel.
When?
So we made the decision today, and we are...
You made the decision today, Sharon?
Yeah. We were talking about it for a while, and we keep saying, it will calm down, it will calm down. And after last night, we've decided to go. So we are going to aim to go in November.
So this is the ambulance attack. That's the moment that you thought, right, it's time to get out of the UK.
Yeah. And I don't think what people don't realise is Hatzalah is an incredible organisation. And when you're ill, your instinct is to call 999. I've done it myself. And if they are overrun, if the NHS is overrun, they will outsource to Hatzalah. It doesn't matter what colour, what religion, what anything you are, those men and women will come to you and treat you and take you to a hospital. And I think that's the bit that's missed. This is funded by Jews, but it's not for Jews. This is for every single person who needs it. And what they did last night was shatter that.
Sharon, I'm really ashamed that this country has come to this. And
it's not for you to be ashamed.
No, but I do feel it. I just think this country has to be better than this, Sharon. It has to be better than, a good person like you who has contributed a lot to this country. Your family's been here for a long time, and you're thinking, actually, we're going to leave because we don't feel safe because we're Jewish. That is, as you say, it's humiliating, it is shameful, and I feel it's just so terrible. I wish you all the very, very best, Sharon. I really do.
I will leave you with this. We are going to feel safer with ballistic rockets falling on our heads than we do in this country.
That is just an appalling thing. Sharon, I wish you really, really well. Would you keep me updated on what your plans are? Give me another ring before you go, definitely, or if something pops up. Anytime, Sharon. Honestly, you've sort of depressed me, but also restored my faith. Also restored my faith in humanity as well.
I think it will turn around eventually, but
I hope so.
It's going to be a rough ride.
Yeah, Sharon, I really appreciate you giving me a call. Thank you for that.
Thank
you.
Good night.
Good night. That is really upsetting. Really upsetting. Just dreadful. And there are numerous Jewish people who feel the same way. I've spoken to a number of people, but that's today just tipped Sharon over the edge. Final call from Caroline in London. Caroline, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Thanks for taking my call. Well, to be honest, everything that Sharon said, I was phoning up about. I've also made a decision. I'm not religious. I haven't been involved much with the Jewish community, but October the 7th changed me. This country, it's done. And they're going to come for the Brits as well. They're already doing it. We're one of the only countries now that doesn't prescribe the IRCG as a terrorist organisation. We haven't closed down the Muslim Brotherhood. We're allowing hate crimes every week, twice, 3 times a week. I've just come back from abroad, and every single person I've met, Australian, American, Cambodian, Thai, you name it. Where are you from? London. Oh my God, what the hell is going on there? We're lost. And I cannot bear to see Starmer, West Streeting, any politician opening their mouth. It's disingenuous, it's dishonest, and MPs only care about themselves. They're not thinking about the country. And we're also dealing with the Greens, which is becoming a Muslim party. And we're dealing with, I mean, every day I listen to talk, and every day there's something else.
Yeah.
We're not meant to live with this sort of stress. And it's not just, today really shook me up. And it's made my decision, and I don't know how I'm even going to do it. I've lived here all my life, like Sharon. I've paid my taxes. I'm generations here. My mum's a Holocaust survivor, but my great-grandparents lived here. I'm part of the UK system. I'm British.
So many people.
I can't live here anymore.
Caroline, it's awful. There's so many people who feel the way you do, and thank you for your call. I've just got to talk to Patrick Hoskin, but we'll continue this conversation tomorrow night. There are so many Jewish people who want to leave. I just had a heartbreaking call, 2 of them actually, one from Caroline and one from Sharon. Sharon in particular saying, today is it. That's the thing. That's made the decision for her and for her family. Dreadful, absolutely dreadful. Patrick Hoskin is here on the other side of the 10 o'clock news. Hi, Patrick.
Hello there. Well, I'm kicking off with looking at this. It's really interesting to watch the way the news is covering this conversation that Donald Trump has allegedly had with Iran. And it just struck me that one of the headlines on one of the other broadcasts is just saying, Trump says that the US and Iran are talking. Nobody is saying Iran and US are talking.
Definitively.
I mean, it is... where have we come to in the world where you do not believe straight away what the President of the United States is saying?
And it's also, like, who is he actually talking to?
He's
he
already
talking
said
to someone...
he's not talking to the Ayatollah.
Yeah.
So who is he talking to?
And is the Ayatollah actually alive as well? Is there who speaks for the Iranian regime? There's so many different questions.
There's so many questions. I mean, not least that, of course, bombing civilian infrastructure is a war crime. And nobody's really talking about that he was talking about affecting innocent people in Iran. So lots to unpick with this. I'm going to be talking